All right, I'm going to call the meeting to session. First item on the agenda is the roll call.
John Spring.
Here.
Danielle Bailey.
Here.
Seth Anderson.
Here.
Andre Spinelli.
Here.
Brian Looney.
Here.
Jared Gardner.
Here.
Tyler Robinson will be late. Greg Strike is excused. Thank you.
And next on the agenda is the minutes, but did we get a copy of the minutes? Okay. Were the minutes approved at the special meeting though? Oh, for that, yes, gotcha. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
I don't think we can make a motion.
Motion by Commissioner Looney, seconded by Commissioner Spring. Any objections? Seeing no objections, minutes are approved. Next order of business, disclosures. Mr. Gunner?
None.
Commissioner Spring?
I have none.
Commissioner Looney?
Yes. Actually, I'd like to disclose that for item G2, for the case 2018-0113, my company was involved in 2017 with a conceptual site layout on what's considered, site 22. And this was before the actual site selection document was prepared. I did not work on that project, but my company did do that task.
Does another commissioner want to go through the conflict of interest or move for the commissioner to participate?
I can't make a motion, but if I could, I would make a motion for Commissioner Looney to participate.
We're working on it. I think it should be there now.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I'll briefly read through the conflict of interest list. Commissioner, did you have a substantial part of the present action?
No.
One that varies directly and substantially with the outcome?
I don't believe so.
Immediate and known or conjectural and dependent on factors beyond the body's action?
No.
Significant monetarily?
No.
Generally possessed by a large group or only by the individual? That's a tough
I never
one.
forget what that one meant.
I agree. Okay. I think we should work on this list here, I think, because, well, it seems that parcel 22 is which one?
By the Totem Theater. And at that time, this was a year before the site selection task was undertaken, but that was just the one tract that the school district wanted us to consider. And we did a brief, probably a 6-hour analysis of what it would look like.
As far as the bus barn is?
It's just if you were to try to do this bus barn on this site, what would it look like, kind of thing.
Oh, okay.
And yeah,
it appears to me that since Commissioner Looney wasn't directly involved in this project, and furthermore that this is not one of the two major sites recommended by the staff under consideration tonight, that he should be given approval to participate.
All right, it has been moved by Commissioner Springs, seconded by Commissioner Anderson. Any more comment on the matter, or should we move to a vote? Seeing no further discussion, vote. And Commissioner Looney has been instructed to participate.
all right.
And I can pass over the, okay. Commissioner Robinson, do you have any disclosures?
Just that in the matter of the case number related to the road project that we're reviewing, 1895, I was deemed to have a conflict and did not participate in the last case, and I won't be participating again.
All right. And I have no disclosures. Commissioner Spinelli?
Nothing.
Commissioner Anderson?
None.
All right. Then I believe that brings us to item G1, so we can go ahead and dismiss Commissioner Robinson for right now. Thanks for coming.
Yep. We'll be back.
At the last meeting, one of the things that was decided is that this matter was going to be opened up for public hearing. So as our first presenter gets ready to present, I'm going to go ahead and read the procedures for public hearings. The procedure by which the public may speak to the commission at its meetings is that after the staff presentation is completed on public hearing items, the chair will ask for public testimony on the issue. Any persons who wish to testify will follow the time limits established by the commission rules of procedures. Petitioners, including all their representatives, get 10 minutes. Part of this time may be reserved for rebuttal. Representative groups, such as community councils, PTAs, and other organizations, receive 5 minutes. All other individuals only receive 3 minutes. Up there will be a light that displays when your time is up, and I'll also be keeping track. When your testimony is complete, you may be asked by questions by the commission. You may only testify once on any issue unless questioned by the commission. Since we're having 2 public hearings today, you could testify on each one, but you could not testify twice on one. An individual may have appeal rights relating to the action at the Planning and Zoning Commission that they take, except commission recommendations to the Assembly, which are not appealable. Appeals must be filed with the clerk's office within 20 days after approval by the Planning and Zoning Commission of the resolution, which is the commission's final decision. A fee for appeal is required at the time of filing. Can we get our first presenter? We're announce the case. Yeah, the first case number will be case 2018-0095. And the petitioner is the Municipality of Anchorage, PM&E. And can we get the staff report?
Thank you. So this meeting, or this item was postponed from November 5th, the November 5th, 2018 meeting for a public hearing to be opened, and also for the project, to give time for the project to be reviewed by the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee, and also for the Commission to receive more information on crime prevention through environmental design principles. So between our last meeting and now, 158 public hearing notices were mailed on November 15th in anticipation of tonight's meeting. And the project team held 3 meetings with stakeholders, including the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee. One of those meetings was the Freight Advisory Committee that met on November 14th. The project team also presented a Division 0 safety event at Beans Cafe on November 29th. And finally met with the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee on December 5th. And there were comments and questions, but no objections to the design discussed in the last meeting. So the comments and questions that were relayed to staff are in the packet that you received just before this meeting. So the summary of that, each of those meetings is available. And also a 1-page summary of crime prevention through environmental design basics for this project in particular is also provided. And that's all I have for the update since the last meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for staff? Mr. Anderson?
Yeah, just to confirm that there was no additional documentation or information provided by PM&E.
No, all the documentation you have for this meeting is in front of you.
All right, thank you. If we could get a representative from PM&E.
I was told I was here to answer questions. So I guess I'll just give you a brief summary of the project as we discussed last meeting. My name is Glenda Advansky. I'm with Project Management and Engineering. I'm the design engineer. The task put in front of us was to look at alternatives to address pedestrian safety in this corridor. The corridor under discussion extends from Post Road to Ingra. It's 3rd Avenue. Currently, the cross-section of that roadway at Post is 3 lanes on the west side of the intersection, but 2 lanes on the east side of the intersection. And then when you get up to Ingra, it's narrowed down to 2 lanes. There's a lane that's dropped as you're approaching Ingra. Our proposal to increase pedestrian safety in the corridor is to remove one of the travel lanes. It's not needed for vehicular traffic. The volumes are such that we can accommodate the vehicular traffic with 2 lanes. And by eliminating the 3rd travel lane and putting in pedestrian facilities on the south side, we are both shortening the crossing distance for the pedestrians, and we are also improving pedestrian access through the implementation of a rather large sidewalk on the south side of the project. We are in compliance with the currently adopted bicycle and pedestrian plan, and as Colin mentioned, we did go to the AMATS Bike and Ped Committee per your request. We met with them last week, and they actually seem to be pretty excited about the project. So I guess with that, I'm going to go ahead and leave it, and then if you have questions at the end, I'll be more than happy to answer to the best of my ability, if that's okay.
Yes, thank you. Are there any questions? There are. Commissioner Anderson?
Sure.
Or is that from? All right, then Commissioner Spring?
Yeah, there was a meeting with the Trucking Association, I see.
They had
summarize that?
one of their normal meetings, and staff did attend, yes.
Oh, staff, did you go to that?
I did not call in.
Oh, okay. I see some notes here, so I want to, I'll just read those then, thank you.
Anything else?
And Commissioner Looney?
And actually, my questions were really in the same vein as Commissioner Spring. So the Trucking Association had 2 written comments in our package that are since we met last. Do you have much? Is there much change to the design, or any insight that we can glean from their comments? Essentially, what I see is that they don't think that or they want to keep all 3 lanes through
Correct.
this section.
Correct.
Essentially for pedestrian safety and just for more maneuvering room to avoid collisions or accidents. Is that how you interpret their comments, or?
That's how I interpreted their
Okay.
comments, yes.
Okay. That's fine.
Okay. Any other questions?
And Commissioner Spring, I see you're back in the queue.
Just to follow up on that, yeah. I guess I can see their problem. I still don't know how many trucks there are. They didn't say that it was a busy route, but it seems like they have some concerns about it. But would a alternative be like some type of shoulder gap or a shoulder there, which would give them the separation from the pedestrians, which they seem to be seeking without having a 3rd lane? Is that like a compromise that would be considered?
It does defeat the purpose. If you put in 3.5-foot lanes, shoulders on either side, the intent behind removal of the lane was to decrease the crossing distance. The less time that pedestrians are in the roadway, the less likely they are to be hit. It's pretty simple. So if the goal is to increase pedestrian safety, then shortening the crossing distance is an excellent recommendation. Is it the only recommendation? At this point in time, yes. I will tell you, I met with both the electrical designer, as I mentioned previously. We have on board CRW to do the lighting design, and we also have Bettisworth North on task to do the SEPTED/landscape design for us. And we had quite the lively discussion about alternatives. We discussed the possibility of fencing. The problem with fencing is, what if you're on the wrong side of the fence? You put enough openings in fencing, and then you've defeated the purpose of fencing. At the end of the day, the conclusion that we came to, in addition to the conclusion with multiple entities within my department and also with the Bike and Ped folks at AMATS, by putting in extra large pedestrian facilities, we're talking about methodologies by which to still continue to call them a sidewalk for enforcement purposes, but to create a visual delineation for pedestrians and for motorists alike, that it's different. We're talking about putting in like colored concrete in between the back of curb and the edge of the regular concrete that would be, but calling it all sidewalk for enforcement purposes and functionality purposes as well. But really, the bottom line is having a pedestrian corridor that is as heavily used as this one and having trucks in the same place doesn't work. It's counterintuitive. I mean, there is no solution that is perfect for trucks and pedestrians at the same time. If I shorten the crossing distance for the pedestrians, the trucks lose a lane. We are accommodating all of the trucks, as near as I can tell, because it's technically designated as a doubles route, so our design vehicle will accommodate for all turning purposes the truck movements, but removal of that lane will impact their ability to dodge pedestrians. Arguably, there will be less time for the pedestrians to be influenced by the trucks because they won't be sharing the same space for as long because the crossing distance is shorter. But I can't control pedestrian behavior, so that's a very long answer to say I don't know the answer to your question. It's a problem. But we believe that we've done the best that we can given all of the user groups that are assigned and the task that we've been given, which is to improve pedestrian safety.
And seeing no one else in the queue, we will now open it up for public comment. Is there anyone from the public wishing to comment on this matter?
Thank you.
And just a reminder, when you come up, state your name for the record and then say whether or not you're representing an organization.
Good evening. My name is Aves Thompson. I'm the Executive Director of the Alaska Trucking Association, and I'm here on behalf of the Alaska Trucking Association. The ATA has reviewed these alternatives and at this time proposes a no-build alternative. We don't believe that the issue of pedestrian safety has been satisfactorily addressed. As the previous speaker said that, you can't have both, right? So, and the effort here seems to be to narrow the crossing space for the pedestrians. Well, it's our experience that pedestrians in that area don't use crosswalks. They step off into the street, creating a safety hazard for themselves and for our drivers. We originally thought perhaps this might be a good idea, but as we looked at it further, we find that the center lane provides us effectively a safe haven where our drivers can drive in the center lane. If someone steps off the sidewalk on either side of the street, we have some place to go. There's an escape route. Whereas if we're driving in the lane directly adjacent to the sidewalk with no divider there and people stepping off into the street, someone's going to get hurt. And that's the very last result that we want. The pedestrians don't use the crosswalks. The other concern we have is that this is a major truck route for us to get back to the Port of Anchorage, and coming from the industrial area down in the Ship Creek area over on the Viking Drive neighborhood there. Why you come back, and if you're going to go south on the Seward Highway, you come up 3rd Avenue and turn left onto Gamble and head on south. We don't claim that we want exclusive right to it, but we feel that it's an important route for us, and to go any other way is going to cause congestion of other kinds, and hopefully we can resolve this. Maybe there's a fencing issue. Maybe there's some other way to accommodate the pedestrians. We believe that this is a larger problem than just closing a traffic lane. We made some comments to the record. We'd like to be sure that we consider that there are a bunch of near misses. There are some concerns about the turning radius from Post Road onto 3rd Avenue. If you narrow that space there, why the long combination vehicles it will be a difficult maneuver for them to make a right turn onto 3rd Avenue from Post Road. So We'd like some further study. We'd like PME to come and look at the traffic on Sunday mornings or all day Sunday when the ship comes in, and then again Tuesday when the ship comes in, and see just exactly how much traffic there is in that area. And it's really one of the very few, we believe, safe routes for our long combination of vehicles to get without going downtown. We've had mayors in the past who say they don't want trucks downtown. We don't want to disrupt downtown. What we want to do is deliver the freight. So if there are any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them.
Just for clarification, Commissioner Looney and Spring, were you in the queue from before? All right, Commissioner Gardner?
Thank you. I guess my question goes to the understanding of what the safety issue is as understood by the Trucking Association. And is it that the additional lane provides trucks the option to kind of stay in the center and avoid pedestrian kind of spillover into the road? Or is it that as people are crossing, if a truck in the center lane has the option to kind of swerve left or swerve right to avoid?
Through the chair, Commissioner Gardner, it's the spillover, because at meal times there are large congregations of people down there, and they're not often careful to stay on the sidewalk, and we just don't want to create any situations there that will cause harm to anyone.
Okay, so the benefit of the third lane primarily, as you understand it, is so that a truck in the third lane can avoid spillover on either side.
Gives us a safety valve, yes.
Okay, and then I'm also curious. You mentioned that you were initially in favor of the proposal, but then after looking into it further, identified these additional safety concerns. And I'm wondering if that looking into it was what that entailed, if that was conversations with.
Well, the first conversation, Commissioner, I'm sorry, through the chair, Commissioner Gardner, was that there's some choking down of the lanes going from 3 to 2 as you get to Ingra. And we thought perhaps that would smooth that traffic out. But then as we looked at it further, we realized that we were sacrificing safety for a little bit of congestion up the top of that hill. And of course, there's always some fool that wants to go around the truck or the car or whatever's slower than they are, and they go racing up there, and that could be a conflict too. But we feel it's more important to try to minimize the contact with the pedestrians, particularly in front of Beans Cafe and the other locations there that are serving meals to people at lunchtime, and there become large amount of people, a large amount of people who tend to spill off the sidewalk into the street.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Spring?
Yes. I think I understand a little bit about how the trucks circulate in the port, but maybe you could clarify some things for me.
I'll try.
The majority of them, I'm assuming the single units, go use the viaduct, the C Street viaduct, with the ramps from the port, and go through A Street and then turn on 6th and go down Ingra or something to get out of town. Or is this route primarily for double trailers? Because I know the double trailer route goes down, I think, Whitney, then it hits Post Road, right? And double trailers can only use that route to get out of the port, right?
Yeah. Through the chair, Commissioner Spring, the doubles routes are not clearly defined. I mean, they were defined back some 25 or 30 years ago, and they've sort of morphed into a little different change than the official maps that are there. The traffic that's coming onto 3rd Avenue from Post Road is traffic that's coming up from the Viking Road area and up, and there's some of those are long combinations. They're going up out of town. Some of those go out the other way if they're going north. But if they're coming up and headed south, they want to get up to Ingra and go south. There are long combination tanker trucks who are typically empty coming from the north, coming from Fairbanks, going to the port to pick up fuel to in turn take it back to Fairbanks. I have a couple of other of my members here with me tonight who probably could help better explain that traffic flow if we might call on them.
Yeah, I'm not sure it would help a lot. I was just trying to get a feel for the volume and the function of Third Avenue and as it relates to the overall circulation.
I think they could help you. They travel that route every day.
I have to ask the other commissioners if they.
Yeah, if you want to call them down,
Okay, thank you.
speak to the matter.
Mark?
My name is Mark Leighton. I work for Weaver Brothers. I'm the operations manager for Weaver's. I've been down at the port all my working career. I've been there for 44 years, so I've been familiar with that whole area and what's the traffic patterns and what goes on down there. There's a lot of freight that's consolidated, generated in the port area outside the port. We'll call Whitney Road, Carlisle's down there, Alaska West is down there, we're down there, Shoreside Petroleum. There's a number of different trucking businesses that are down there that consolidate freight, get freight, and they take it south. There's long combinations. These vehicles are over 120 feet long. Some of them weigh up to 146,000 pounds when they're fully loaded. So there's a concern about losing that turn area, not being able to use all the road surface to make a turn safely. You have to remember you're making a right-hand turn onto 3rd Avenue. It becomes a blind turn. You lose sight of the vehicles going around that corner. So the way it's working right now with the road surface that's available, if you look at it, you see that there's a lot of tracks from trucks that are coming up around that corner. There's rail sites down there that you can have cement loaded into bulkers. Again, like Abe said, there's fuel that's picked up down at the port. That's a common route for the trucking industry in doubles and singles that leave town or go to South Anchorage. Does that help?
Can I get your last name again for the record?
It's Leighton, L-U-I-T-E-N.
Thank you.
If there are no further questions, thank you, Madam Chair.
One moment. There is one more from Mr. Hodges.
I'm sorry, not so much a question. I'm able to chime in with discussion. So as Glenda, our project management engineering representative mentioned, this project is trying to balance a wide variety of users. There's a large amount of pedestrian traffic documented in this corridor. There are a high number of crashes involving pedestrians documented in this corridor. And as Glenda also mentioned, the design will allow freight to move. It will allow all design vehicles that use this corridor to traverse it. Removing a lane is due to the fact that it is first and foremost a pedestrian safety project. Not removing that lane would greatly impact or reduce the efficacy of the design.
Thank you. And you can step down now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Ron Oleva, 44-year resident of Anchorage. I own Grub Steak Auction. I have appeared before this board and said Beans and Brother Francis is untouchable. Well, this project touches them, and I oppose it in its entirety. Not only because of safety, but those are the wrong locations for those institutions, and they're not managed properly. It's hard enough to get across the street sober, but those people on drugs and alcohol, these poor truckers, when they hit one, the guilt lives with them, not with the person who just got hit. Even the quarter now, there's no crosswalks from Reeve Boulevard over to Cordova Street. Nothing that says stop, wait, walk. You have to use the pedestrian crossing with a flashing light on about an 18% slope. And you pull a 146,000-pound truck, you're not going to get up the hill. You're going to have to back up, jackknife, and then you're going to sweep those people off their feet like bowling pins. But this project is so out of whack, I can't believe it's even producing it for pedestrians. And I sued the Brother Francis and Beans because of their mismanagement. And before you go forward with this project, you got to get those institutions under control. And one of the issues, and I've been there for 38 years as the number one property owner surrounding those institutions, is they had in their conditional use to address the crosswalk. Wilbur was the transportation director, Lance Wilbur, and they were supposed to do something about that crosswalk. Nothing. They don't show up for any of these public hearings, and if you hold a meeting at Beans, they tried to get a restraining order against me because allegedly I tried to disinfect and hurt the homeless. Well, you go down to that open sewer and understand how those people behave and live, you can see the tents on it now. And you want to widen the sidewalk? You can't get through it now with a 12-man tent. I think you're really jumping the gun on spending this kind of money. And of course, you could always tell the assembly to buy me out, and then you can have any disasters you want. Because when you run over homeless people, that's one way to reduce that population. Not quite my way, but it does happen, and you can't blame those truckers. So I oppose this whole project. This doesn't have any relevant data from the people who go there every day, like myself. This is a waste of money, and it's an unsafe adventure. And I'll answer any questions from my 38 years of being down there. I've seen a guy's head.
Are there any questions? Sorry to cut you off, but we do have a very full meeting today.
You know, that's what I object to, because there's no sense listening to the facts because your minds are already made up, and that's a shame.
Thank you for coming. Just as a reminder, there is a clock, and be aware of your time. Just we want to be able to give the respect to everyone to be able to participate. Is there anyone else wishing to comment on the matter? Thank you.
Hi, my name is Dan Juris, J-U-R-U-S-Z, and I'm the safety manager for Weaver Brothers, a local trucking company down in that area. Here in Anchorage, we have about 50 drivers based out of our Anchorage terminal, and on a typical day, we have about 30 to 40 trucks transiting the 3rd Avenue corridor 6 days a week. I just wanted to speak briefly about the pedestrian safety aspect that Mr. Thompson spoke about earlier. What we've seen here in reviewing the plan and the documents that have been put out about this project does a good job of looking at the historical accident data in that corridor in terms of accidents and pedestrian-involved accidents, but as was referred to earlier, does not address the issue of near misses. Now, I don't have hard data on the near misses, but anecdotally, I can tell you as a safety manager that my drivers report more near misses in the 3rd Avenue corridor with pedestrians in front of Beans Cafe and Brother Francis than they do in the rest of the city put together. The issues we have transiting that corridor are ones involving pedestrians who are jaywalking, pedestrians who are spilling over off of the sidewalk into the street, pedestrians who are in fights getting pushed into the street, inebriated pedestrians stumbling and falling into the street. We've even seen situations with pedestrians who are passed out in the middle of the street in that zone. Just to reiterate what was said earlier, we really do believe as drivers, as a company, that having that middle lane, using that middle lane for our trucks is the safest alternative for the pedestrians there. Our trucks, when we go through there, we're safe, but I tell you, there's not a single person who works for us who goes through there who doesn't worry every day about the safety of those pedestrians. And just being able to continue to use that center lane to have that advance warning of anybody leaving the sidewalk would be the safest alternative for those folks.
Thank you. And I see there's a question from Commissioner Anderson.
Yeah, I think that one of the design approaches is to reduce the lane, but also to provide some sort of barrier between the pedestrian sidewalk and the roadway. Is there a type of barrier that would make the truck drivers feel more safe or more comfortable with a narrower road?
Short of having a fence blocking access to the road for anywhere other than a designated marked crosswalk, I don't believe there would be.
Thank you.
Richard Braun, B-R-A-U-N. I want to second Mr. Oliva's comments, most of his comments. Taking the center lane out to put in some sort of safe zone. They've already got a sidewalk on both sides. Those are safe zones. What makes you think they're going to be safe in the safe zone? They can't manage to stay on the sidewalk or use an appropriate crosswalk. Why spend a lot of money trying to put another safe zone just so they can go out in the middle of the street and cause another hazardous thing? I think it'd be better off, like the last gentleman said, let's fence off the sidewalks so anybody that wants to get to the other side has to go to an intersection where there's directed traffic or a light, and let them cross there, not just take off on the shortest route. I don't think you're going to save anything with the pedestrians. It's foolhardy. If you ever go down and watch them, it's foolhardy. Thank you.
Thank you for your time. Is there anyone else from the public wishing to speak? Then can the representative from PM&E come up for the remaining time in the rebuttal? And you have 8 minutes and 36 seconds for rebuttal.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Commission. There is no simple solution. As I stated previously, the two primary user groups that have been identified through the discussions this evening are counterintuitive. Trucks and high volumes of pedestrians don't play nice. They just don't go well together. We did examine at length the possibility of putting in some sort of a physical barrier to separate the pedestrians from the roadway, and the issue is there are several issues associated with that. And at the end of the day, I do not believe that there is an alternative that we would be able to pursue. I'll explain briefly what the issues are. The first is anytime you put a barrier, you have to consider what happens if people or animals or whatever ends up on the wrong side of the barrier. I'll use the example of the fencing along the Glen Highway. It's to keep moose out, but does it work? How often do you see moose on the inside of the fence? The answer is fairly often, because once they get inside the fence, they can't get out. So the solution to that problem is you build in more openings. The more openings you build in, the less likely you are to be able to keep the pedestrians from crossing at locations you have identified. And then it gets to the point where you look at it and you say, we're actually worried about creating a more unsafe situation by putting in physical barriers than not putting in physical barriers. So the fencing issue is unlikely to move forward. It is incredibly difficult to put in any sort of a barrier that is going to provide any protection for the pedestrians or the folks driving on the roadway that is going to not create other concerns. Other than that, I really have nothing to add. You know, we have looked at the alternatives. We know that there's a high volume of trucks. We will be accommodating their turning movements as part of the design, but we are still planning to move forward with the two-lane facility with the large pedestrian facilities on both sides.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Commissioner Spring?
Yeah, just a procedural one. Our role is to make a recommendation for approval of this design study report.
Correct. Well, actually, I'll defer to planning since they're the pros.
Yes, that is correct. Thank you.
And is that the final step in the approval of the design study report?
Yes, the commission approval is the final step.
And then for the final design, 95% or whatever, it's the design, Urban Design Commission.
Correct. The Urban Design Commission reviews the 65% plans and hand drawings.
And what role does AMAT's Technical Advisory Committee and Policy Committee have on these projects?
So the AMATS committees don't have any direct role in the design of the projects. They serve as they organize advisory boards. The Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee is one. The Freight Advisory Committee is another, both of which we met with this past month. The American Trucking Association, several representatives who are here, are part of the Freight Advisory Committee.
Is there a scheduled presentation, presentation of this project to the AMATS Policy or Technical Advisory Committee?
There is no AMATS funding as part of this project. This project is wholly funded by Municipality of Anchorage funds. Therefore, AMATS doesn't. The purpose behind the AMATS committees is to approve projects that are funded by AMATS. And because this project is not funded by AMATS or by the state of Alaska, it's wholly funded by the Municipality of Anchorage. Generally, the answer to that question is no.
This is a bond-funded project?
Correct.
And
so there isn't really no transportation board that really reviews city projects then?
Well, the traffic department does.
But not any citizen board or anything? Besides us, I guess. That's it then. Okay.
So the AMATS committees, or AMATS reviews the application, the DSR. So the design study report goes by all relevant city agencies and through AMATS, and they can at any time request that this projects be brought to them and open to the public in that manner. But correct, this forum is the primary default public hearing.
And you don't have anything further, Ms. Rogers? Any further questions? Commissioner Gardner.
Yeah, I think I'd like to ask, just to make sure I'm understanding the issue, at least when we're talking about pedestrian safety, and that's, I guess I would just look for your input on my formulation of it, and that's that the comments we heard from the Trucking Association, as I understand their concerns, it's that they want that middle lane, I think, primarily to be able to avoid kind of spillover, pedestrian spillover, and the design that you were recommending and proposing eliminates that middle lane, and the thought is that would improve pedestrian safety in two ways. One would be diminishing the crossing distance for pedestrians that actually are attempting to cross all the way across, and secondly, to on the side where they otherwise would be spilling over, have some sort of design elements that kind of helps, I don't know what the framing is exactly, but kind of keep them away from the edge of the road. Is that a fair summary?
I would say yes, but then I would also, sorry, through the chair, I would also add a third element to that, and that currently there are no pedestrian facilities on the south side of the roadway, and we would be adding pedestrian facilities on the south side as well. Okay, right. And if we're looking at kind of what the net effect of those changes are, what do we have any data that we're looking at, or is it more just an understanding of the design elements and how they've been effective in other areas? If that makes sense. I'm sorry, I don't understand your question.
Well, just if we're trying to evaluate, how the effect of pedestrian safety will play out, the proposal versus the concerns that have been presented by the Trucking Association with the elimination of that third lane, if there's any sort of
I can tell you through the chair, I have found no studies that address a situation like this one.
Okay.
So I have studies that show that decreasing pedestrian crossing distance improves pedestrian safety. I have studies that show putting pedestrian facilities where pedestrian facilities don't currently exist improves pedestrian safety. I don't have a study that says when you have a doubles route that's heavily in a heavily used
Sure.
pedestrian corridor, this is a better or worse solution. So they're not that I could find, at least.
Okay, I can appreciate that. Do we have any numbers on, with respect to the accidents that have occurred, how many of them are related to, or I guess what the nature of the accidents are, if it's spillover versus crossing versus what side of the road it's on?
Almost all of them, to the best of my recollection, were pedestrians that were hit in the roadway. Whether or not they were actually in the crosswalk, I do not know the answer to that question. So I would have to do some, and I'm not even sure how much actual data I could get to. I just know what types of accidents they are. I don't know the specifics associated with them.
Okay, thank you.
And that summary is actually provided in the design study report.
I actually had a question regarding the fencing, and you spoke a lot to how if you have a fence on one side, that then people could cross over at an area where there is no opening, and then they're kind of stuck in the middle of the roadway. And I understand that logic, and I think that makes a lot of sense. However, where I think there is a slight difference between the moose example and an example of pedestrians is if we put those fences on both sides, it would only allow people to enter from one area, which would then, their closest spot would be directly across the street. So was it ever looked at doing fencing along both sides of the road to fully funnel those people to the crosswalks?
Yes. It is possible to do so. However, there are, in addition, and I apologize, I kind of skipped over this. When you're doing fencing, okay, if you're putting fencing along the back of road or the back of curb and gutter, right, which is what we're essentially discussing here. As you approach an intersection, and any time you have turning movements associated with road vehicles, you have to provide what they call sight distance. And what that means is you can't have anything in the way so that the drivers can't see cars coming. That's the thought process behind it. So if you do a quick analysis of what sight distance requirements you would have, in this project it's a little bit unique because it's a one-way street, but you still have to be able to see far enough down the street to be able to make a decision about when you're going to make a safe left turn, right? The issue with that is that the opening gets bigger and bigger and bigger depending on the speeds of the vehicles coming through and other accommodation type issues. So now instead of being able to put in a 5-foot opening, I'm having to put in a 30-foot opening. Anytime you have a 30-foot opening, there is an opportunity for people to get into that area, whether you've got them funneled to a crosswalk or not. And so what happens is if you have someone who, instead of heading towards the crosswalk, makes a right turn instead of a left turn, then they're approaching an area where there is fencing on the opposite side, and they are trapped, at least until they get an opportunity to move up to the opening. So it's not... If it was just pedestrians, if we had no cross-street traffic or other considerations, it would be a more feasible solution. But once you start factoring in, again, all of the balancing act that we're required to meet, the solution becomes more problematic and less appealing as a possible solution. Does that answer your question?
I think it makes sense. In the future, it would have been helpful to see some of that visually. So then we had better ideas of what sort of options we were working with. Commissioner Spring?
Well, we are at 35%, which is appropriate. The process that we're using for this project is the CSS process, and this is a component of that. There is no requirement for a public advisory committee as part of the CSS process. I just checked.
So there isn't any plans for a citizen advisory committee or anything?
No.
Working on this? Okay.
Keep in mind, John, there's detailed drawings.
Commissioner Anderson?
Question for staff. If the project is using bond money, is the bond already approved, or is it going to be up for approval in the future?
Yes, it is approved.
And Commissioner Looney?
Okay, well, thank you. So it's been a long month since last month, but I was reminded that the staff packet had recommendations. There were 4 conditions of the recommendations. Do you recall those? Or
off the top of my head, one was to shorten up the turning distances.
Yep. Is the cast, is that?
I apologize. I do not recall the rest of them.
I'll help you out. I didn't
Thank
know
you.
them either. I have a copy of them. Essentially, Yeah, the Carlick and Latouche intersections, I think we talked at that last month that you had no problem increasing those radiuses to accommodate the larger buses.
Actually, the request from traffic is if you look at those streets, they're one-way street, you're turning onto a one-way street. And so what traffic actually requested was that we make the turning radiuses on the non-turning side really sharp.
The west side sharp, that's right.
The east side. The east side sharp, because you can't turn right, you can only turn left off of those side streets. So you make this turning radius really sharp, and then you make this one broad so that they can make this movement, but this movement is less likely prohibited.
That's right.
And also shortens the crossing distance for pedestrians. The turning radius that will either stay the same or enlarge is the one from southbound Post on to 3rd. That's the one that the Trucking Association is concerned about. And that one is going to change because we were originally proposing to take out that bus turnout. Transit has requested we put it back in, and so we'll be taking a look at that, but we will be using a design vehicle that is adequate for the freight movements that we'll be accommodating.
Actually, the bus pilot was one of the other comments too. So so I think you covered them all, I think.
Okay.
One of the last ones was there's a recommendation that the 6-foot trail easement on the north side be utilized if needed to meet the minimum multi-use trail standards. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So, yeah, seems clear to me. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
And seeing no further questions, I think you're done. And what is the will of the body? Motion by John Spring. Can you use your microphone?
In the matter of case number 2018-0095, Context Sensitive Solutions Transportation Project Site Plan Review, 3rd Avenue Channelization Project, I make a motion recommending approval of the design study report subject to the 4 conditions of approval listed on page 13 of the staff report.
And that motion is seconded by Commissioner Gardner. Would you like to speak to your motion?
Yeah, I'm going to throw. I'm going to throw out an amendment to my own motion, if I may. I want to recommend that make a motion that a citizen advisory committee be formed to help guide the details of the final design from 35% to 95%, to include members of the Trucking Association, at least one designee of the Trucking Association, one from the Bike and Ped, one neighborhood resident nearby, somebody from the Beans Cafe, and also the Brother Francis Shelter as a minimum.
And is there a second? Seconded by Commissioner Anderson. Would you like to speak to your amendment?
Well, yeah, I think, sometimes you just can't run a project, just like it's an ordinary one. We've all been on the commission, many of us have been on the commission for quite a while. We've heard of the problems down in the Brother Francis Shelter. And this public hearing, I think, was a good idea, because now it's very clear to me that the conflicts are really important, really severe. Trying to negotiate the balance between the trucking needs and the pedestrian needs is going to be very, very difficult. I can't see that it's going to be useful just to go back into the office, work on the plan from here, and present it to the Urban Design Commission without then having another public hearing there and having the same issues come out. I think it doesn't mean, the Citizen Advisory Committee doesn't mean that you have to do everything they say you have to do, or they want to do. It's just that it gives them an opportunity to voice their concerns and be heard. And I think it would result in a better project. But the downside is that it takes time, to do it, and effort to organize it. And I am concerned that about project delay. But I think in the end, it might actually speed things up if it avoids controversy to some extent.
Thank you. Seeing no other members wishing to speak on this, I would also like to speak on the amendment. I would like to thank you for adding this amendment. I know for my part, even though we only need to approve it at the 35%, it just seems like a great proportion of this project actually depends on this pedestrian access route, and it's a very complicated matter. We've seen that it having just a fence has all these other drawbacks, and I don't think that that can be adequately looked at and be determined that the 35% areas kind of be the be-all, end-all in this. So I do think we need to involve more citizens in the future, both from the Trucking Association, our pedestrians, which I think you cover with the bikes, and then also with the neighboring properties. That way we're ensuring that it's not just an organization going in there, but that they're talking with people who are on this route every day. So I thank you for that amendment, and I'll be voting in favor of it. Commissioner Looney.
Actually, so I think I'll be voting in favor of it also, but I really think it's everything I know about the department and what I see in the packet, that the design team has already been working with the Downtown Community Council, the Fairview Community Council, the Truckers Association, and so my guess is that they've already started this coordination, and I guess if we just make sure that they follow through with it and include the groups that we've listed for them to meet, it's worthwhile.
All right, call for a vote on the motion to amend the motion. And the amendment has been approved. Would anyone like to speak to the main motion as amended? Commissioner Spring.
Yeah, I'd just like to say that I think the design study report concept is a good place to start. I think the staff has gone through alternatives sufficiently, and they discarded some that they believe is not appropriate. I would like to encourage them to be a little bit more flexible, though. I mean, on some of the issues, besides the two-lane, that seems to be set. You consider shoulders that wouldn't violate the concept report, design study report, and all the details that are going to be needed to be filled in are going to be very important. But I think I'm comfortable with recommending approval of the design study report, preferred alternative at this point.
Thank you, Commissioner Spring. Commissioner Looney?
Yeah, as the discussion has shown, this is a complicated topic, and it really comes down to space. There's limited space, whether we provide more space in the road that truckers can take advantage of directly, or provide that more space on in the pathways or sidewalks. And it's really a balance between the two. And what the final solution is, I guess, to be determined. I'm comfortable with the solution that I see already, but it should not probably be considered done yet until we do a little more research. But there's no magic bullet that's going to be perfect. It's more just getting that balance right.
Just to add in a little more myself, I would like to say that this is, I think Commissioner Looney kind of hit the nail on the head here, that this isn't a situation where it's ever going to be perfect, but I think this goes a long way towards making it safer, which is our end goal. And I would also like to thank those from the public for coming here today. It wasn't initially a public hearing, and I think a lot of value was added towards opening it up to the public. Commissioner Gardner.
I'll just add, I'll be supporting the motion as well. And the last time we reviewed this, I expressed, I don't know if concern is maybe strong, but a preference for in the application or itself in the report to show some alternatives that maybe were more likely to be considered than the two that were discounted here, alternatives A and B. But I think through the discussions, it became apparent that a lot of consideration did go into the proposals beyond just the specifics that ultimately made it in. And I'll just say as well, on the question of pedestrian safety, I recognize the concerns that the Trucking Association presented, and I think those had been considered with the elimination of the additional lane of traffic, and that there are a number of steps that have been taken to help address pedestrian safety to account for that loss of that lane.
All right, thank you. And call for a vote. And that motion passes. Next on our agenda is case 2018-0113. Before we get into that, however, I'm going to take a brief break as one of our commissioners is still waiting, and that way we can take a bathroom break if needed. I texted him too. Oh, he's coming in.
Here that probably want to come up and grab the mic here. So, did you say you needed to? Because Lori gets something set in our system. The next case that we have before us is 2018-113, public facility site selection for, I think what's commonly called the Anchorage School District Bus Barn. I'll remind you the procedure by which the public may speak. After staff presentation is completed on public hearing items, I'll ask for public testimony. Persons who wish to testify will follow the time limits established in the rules of procedure. Petitioners, 10 minutes. Representatives of groups such as community councils, 5 minutes, and individuals, 3 minutes. When your testimony is complete, you may be asked questions by the commission. You may only testify once on any issue unless questioned by the commission. An individual may have appeal rights relating to any action the Planning and Zoning Commission takes, except commission recommendations to the Assembly, which are not appealable. Our action here tonight is a recommendation to the Assembly. So with that, could I get the staff report?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to point out that there were some late comments laid on the table tonight, comments received after the staff packet was put together. The Real Estate Department has made application for Assembly approval of the Student Transportation Maintenance Public Facility Site Selection in accordance with Anchorage Municipal Code, Title 21, Chapter 3, Section 140. The site selection study evaluated 83 potential parcels of land in East Anchorage. The Student Transportation Maintenance Facility is classified in Title 21 as government service, which is an industrial use. This use type is permitted in the I-1 light industrial and I-2 heavy industrial districts and is a conditional use in the Public Lands and Institutions District, PLI district. The parcels with obvious environmental constraints and the parcels that are not abutting an arterial road were eliminated from consideration. Sites 13, 18, 21, 22, and 27 were the only potential locations that met the selection criteria requirements. The site selection study recommends 2 of the 5 potential sites. They are Site 18, which is adjacent to the Awu Water Reservoir site. Also, Campbell Airstrip Road is nearby. And Site 27, which is on the Anchorage Police Department campus. Sites 13, 22, and 21 were poor options for various reasons, such as contaminated soils requiring remediation, costly site acquisition of private property, zoning that prohibits the use, and land use designation of recreational use in an adopted municipal plan. None of the municipal reviewing agencies objected to the site selection study's findings. The Basher Community Council provided a resolution. It's on page 125 of the packet that you have. The Northeast Community Council provided a resolution as well. That's on page 38 of your packet. The University Area Community Council provided a letter that's on page 48 of your packet. They are recommending that the site selection study choose Site 18. Many members of the public provided written comments on this site selection study. They're all included in this packet. The Alaska Botanical Gardens also provided a letter. It's on page 65 of the packet. Now, the approval criteria for public facility site selections, this process, the Commission shall review the proposed site for consistency with the goals, policies, and land use designations in the comprehensive plan and other municipal plans adopted by the Assembly, conformity to the requirements of this title, and effects of the proposal on the area surrounding the site. The following specific criteria shall be considered. The first approval criteria is whether the site will allow development that is compatible with current and projected land uses. Now, with Site 18, which is next to Campbell Airstrip Road, the criterion is partially met. The site is identified in the 2040 plan as community, facility, and institution. This designation provides for public facilities on publicly owned land. Some examples of community facilities are utility substations, water and sewer treatment facilities, public works maintenance yards. There is an existing AWU water reservoir site on this parcel south of Site 18. The PLI zoning district there's PLI zoning to the east, south, and west, which is compatible with this designation. Tudor Road runs along the northern boundary of the site. However, Site 18 has the potential of creating a bottleneck of vehicular traffic on Campbell Airstrip Road. The student transportation maintenance facility would add school buses and employee private vehicles to the existing traffic from residents of the Stuckagin Heights neighborhood. The park users, popular trails in far north Bicentennial Park, additionally Fire Station number 14, the Benny Benson Secondary School, and the Alaska Botanical Gardens rely on this as their only access. The annual average daily traffic on Campbell Airstrip Road is 1,411. In regards to Site 27, which is next to the APD campus, or on the APD campus, the site criterion is met. The criterion is met for this standard. Like Site 18, the 2040 land use plan also designates this site on APD campus as community facility or institution. Similar to Site 18, the surrounding zoning on three sides is also PLI, and Tudor Road runs along the northern boundary. Site 27 is different in that the student transportation maintenance facility would benefit substantially from being co-located on the same property as the APD open evidence storage yard because of the existing site security measures like surveillance cameras that exist there. Also, the site has no residential neighbors and is surrounded on all four sides by major roadways. Site 27 would not disrupt the adjacent land uses and has good access going both east and west on Tudor Road. The average daily traffic on Tudor Center Drive is only 523. Approval criterion number 2, whether the site is large enough to accommodate the proposed use in future additions or any other planned public facility. Both Site 18 and Site 27 have plenty of space for the proposed use, the student transportation maintenance facility. Approval criterion number 3, whether the proposed government use and its intensity is compatible with the surrounding district and adopted policies for future development in the district. Site 18, the criterion is partially met. The 1986 Tudor Road Public Lands and Institutions Plan identifies Site 18 as reserve municipal land, which is land managed as open space until a decision on development options is made. Site 18 is problematic because of the access directly onto Tudor Road and across the Benny Benson Secondary School property to Campbell Airstrip Road, which is the only access for many of the homes, or for the homes and the trail users in the Basher Community Council. Tudor Road's a very busy street, especially during rush hour. The AADT is on Tudor Road is 29,000. The intersection of Campbell Airstrip Road and Tudor Road is already a problem intersection. The traffic signal does not have a left-hand turn signal to turn west onto Tudor Road, and the crosswalk is heavily used or well used. There are no alternative routes to the Campbell Airstrip Road for the people who live in Stuckagin Heights residential subdivision. This is also true of the park users in the Basher neighborhood. In regards to Site 27, the criterion is met. The 2007 3500 Tudor Road Master Plan identifies Site 27 as suitable for future development. This site has good access to both Tudor Center Drive and Elmore Road, although the Platting Board would need to approve removal of a plat note that currently prohibits access to Tudor Center Drive. The plat note was offered by the Real Estate Services Division of the municipality when the property was subdivided before Tudor Road even existed. Today, a single driveway to from the student transportation maintenance facility to Tudor Center Drive does not appear to create a safety concern. In regards to approval criteria number 4, whether adequate utility and transportation infrastructure is available to the site, the criterion is partially met for Site 18. The site has limited access options, which are directly onto Tudor Road and across the Benny Benson Secondary School property to Campbell Airstrip Road, which is the only access for Fire Station 14, Benny Benson Secondary School, the Alaska Botanical Gardens, numerous trailheads in Far North Bicentennial Park, and also the residents of Stuckagin Heights subdivision. With regard to Site 27, the criterion is met. The site has an existing driveway onto Elmore Road and good access to Tudor Center Drive. However, the platting process is required to remove a restrictive plat note. In regards to approval criterion number 5, whether the site is located near a transit route, the same transit route, People Mover 25, runs past both sites. Approval criteria number 6, whether there are existing and planned walkways connecting the site to transit stops and surrounding residential areas. The site criterion is partially met for Site 18. There is neither pedestrian facilities on the south side of Tudor Road nor a crosswalk to the north side of Tudor Road. There are pedestrian facilities in Campbell Airstrip Road. With regard to Site 27, the criterion is met. There's good pedestrian facilities built and installed on all 4 sides of that site. Approval criterion number 7, the environmental suitability of the site criterion is met for Site 18. There's sufficient land area outside of the Class A wetlands and away from the stream for this student transportation maintenance facility. Site 27 is also met for this approval criterion. The 9.5-acre developable portion of the site is encumbered by Class B and C wetlands. Development within wetlands requires a permit from the Corps of Engineers. Permits were previously issued to develop the APD campus and the State of Alaska Scientific Crime Lab. The existing permit covering Site 27 would need to be modified for a new development plan. Approval criterion number 8, the financial feasibility of the site, including maintenance and operations. The criterion is met for both sites as they're both already owned by the municipality held by the Heritage Land Bank. Site 9, approval criterion 9, whether the proposed site for major municipal, state, and federal administrative offices conforms to the adopted policy for priority locating in the central business district. This criterion is not applicable because this is not an office use open to the public. So the department finds that the approval criteria for public facility site selection with this study is met, and the department finds that the preferred location for the student transportation maintenance facility is Site 27, Tudor Municipal Campus, Track 2, on the APD campus. The Commission makes a recommendation to the Assembly based on the approval criteria after holding a public hearing. Authority over decisions for public facility site selection lies with the Assembly, enclosed as a draft version of the Assembly resolution. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Are there questions? Ms. Bailey.
I had a question with regards to the site selections. Initially in the packets that were mailed out to in the mail out to individuals, there was 5 sites that were selected. That's correct? 13, 18, 21, 22, and 27.
Thank you, Ms. Bailey. There were the site selection study narrowed things down to 5 and then recommended 2.
All right, and so just because there are a lot of people from the public here to testify, my guess is a lot of them were here to testify when all of those options were fully evaluated and on the table. But specifically tonight, only options 18 and 27 were really evaluated in depth. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And so to kind of provide guidance for the public to the extent that people here are hoping or came to testify because they received presentations based on earlier comments where sites 13, 21, and 22 were options. Would those comments now be more redundant? And would kind of the more important comments be related to sites 18 and 27 since those are the ones that were fully evaluated?
That's correct. Site 13, which is next to Walmart on DeBar Road, is not one of the recommended sites either by this study or by the planning department. It would require private acquisition of private land. There's contaminated soil. It's a town center in our designated plan. Site 18 on near Campbell Airstrip Road That was recommended by the study, but the planning department's recommendation, it doesn't recommend that site because it's has limited access. Site 21 is south of Martin Luther King Boulevard. That's not one of the recommended sites either by the study or the planning department because the 3500 Tudor Road Tudor Road Master Plan designates that property for recreational use purposes. Site 22 next to Totem, that would require rezoning from residential zoning that currently is, also replatting, and then a conditional use permit after that. And it's also next to residential. And so that's not one of the sites that is recommended by the study or by the planning department. Site 27 is one of the two recommended sites by this site selection study and is the preferred option recommended by the planning department. This is the APD campus next to the open storage, evidence storage yard for APD. It has good access. It's close to the existing student transportation maintenance facility, and it's away from residential properties. So for people who are really worried about the implications of this process that we're going through, just know that neither the report or the site selection study or the planning department are recommending, three or four of these sites.
Thank you. I think that would provide a lot of guidance for the public, just so that they're more aware of where we are in this process.
Yeah, so if I could add procedurally, what's presented to us in our packet is an analysis of just those two sites primarily. There's a cursory analysis of the other sites, but just 18 and 27 there's an analysis. So I believe that our decision is to either recommend one, both, or none. That's really all that I believe that we ought to do here tonight. In the event that we were to recommend one, both, or none, is there any chance that you would move forward to the Assembly recommending, would one of those other sites be on the table at the Assembly?
No.
That's what I want to clarify, because otherwise I think it's important for people to state for the record. But if that's all, in my mind, what I would then say procedurally is it would get sent back to the planning department for additional analysis and a recommendation of another site that would come back to us at that point. Yeah. You willing to commit to that?
Yeah.
Okay. That makes sense to everybody? So, and hopefully that made sense to you all, that if you are here to testify on a site other than number 18 or 27, so other than the, for lack of a better term, the APD site or the AWU site, both south of Tudor Road, we're not considering those other sites here this evening. So just to be clear, right? So so you can testify and we can hear about them, but I think the planning department has said pretty clearly that they're not recommending those sites. And because they haven't been analyzed in our packet, we're not analyzing those sites. We are here to evaluate 18 and 27. Everybody comfortable with that as a ground rule here this evening? Members of the commission, are you as well? And again, it's not because we did anything. That's just the way that the packet has been presented to us. And things can happen, right, where things could come back, right? But they would, by commitment that I heard here, they would have to come back explicitly as a recommendation at that point. Michelle, you good with that as well?
Yes.
Okay, so our planning director is good with that as well. So with that, you're welcome to stay for the show, or if you only had something to say on the other sites, the evening is yours. John, you're still in the queue for questions of staff.
Yes, so this is a site selection process. Am I right in assuming that after this there'll be an approval by the Assembly that there'll be a public facility site plan review? After?
Yes.
And who does that? Is that Planning and Zoning Commission or is that the Urban Design Commission? Who does those?
Hold on a second. Mr. Spring, could you repeat the question?
Who's responsible for reviewing and approving the public facility site plan review once the site's selected?
Okay, so I think the first question was, will the Assembly be reviewing this after the Planning and Zoning Commission? Yes, and then the PLI district for this use type requires a conditional use approval. So the Planning and Zoning Commission, you all will be reviewing the selected site for a conditional use permit. And that's something that the Planning and Zoning Commission, could deny the conditional use permit, make stipulations, conditions of approval. That's the site that's selected will be back before the Planning and Zoning Commission in the future.
Just to be clear, I think that's because both sites we're considering are PLI zoned.
Yeah.
If they weren't, that might be a different situation.
Right, okay.
But by definition, that use type is required to go through conditional use in PLI. Any other questions for staff before we go to public hearing? I had one, Mr. McLaughlin, and there's a couple more. On page 5, condition 4 at the bottom of site 27, you say, however, a platting process is required to remove a restrictive plat note. Can you tell me what that plat note is?
That Tudor Center campus plat has a restrictive plat note that says driveway access onto Tudor Center Drive is prohibited. But the origins of that is that before we had MLK Boulevard and there was just a whole bunch of municipal land, and we were trying to, the Heritage Land Bank, Real Estate Services, the municipality was trying to subdivide and create tracts of land for public facilities like the State of Alaska Scientific Crime Lab, for a tract of land for that university area, a utility substation, for the APD campus, for a new road that would be dedicated, Tudor Center Drive. That subdivision was all based on the 3500 Tudor area master plan. And at the time, none of these roads existed, Martin Luther King Boulevard and Tudor Center Drive. And it seemed like a good idea, I guess, to Real Estate Services, the municipality, the subdivider, to offer up a plat note prohibiting access to that new road. But now we have the road, and as I outlined, it has very low ADT 523. So the initial feeling is that a single driveway from this student transportation maintenance facility onto Tudor Center Drive is not going to create a big public safety concern in terms of crashes or something like that.
Gotcha. Okay, you believe conditions are changed, and you want to mess with my shortcut. Okay, I gotcha. All right, Mr. Anderson, then Mr. Gardner.
Yeah, I didn't see a discussion that described what ASD's preference was, or the operators of the bus barn. Was there discussions with them, or did they have preference over sites?
Oh, that's a very good question. No, we don't have comments from ASD. However, the manager of the facility, I think she's in the audience. Yeah.
Okay, so we'll either hear or not later. Thanks, Mr. Gardner, then Mr. Looney.
I was going to ask about the plat note, and it sounds like you don't anticipate any problems removing the plat note. And then, in addition, you mentioned the Section 404 permit would need to be modified. Do you anticipate any problems with that?
No.
Okay, thanks.
Mr. Looney.
Yeah, actually, I had a question about the plat note, I guess on page 5, where it's not really predicated that needs to be done to make this the viable property, because they can still access from Martin Luther King Drive, I assume. Unless you've heard an indication that that's what it takes to make this site successful. Have you heard anything to that effect?
Well, I think that the traffic engineer will need to evaluate. Once a site is selected, we'll have to look at that site and whether a traffic impact analysis is warranted. I don't have I don't have a readout from the traffic engineer on that at this time.
That's how I see it. I think once we get to that point, then we can look into whether we need that driveway on that side. Because I think somewhere I've seen a master plan for the APD campus where they have a new driveway that's halfway between Tudor Center Drive and Elmore Road. I also know that there's a not very well used trail just west of the Tudor Center Drive through the woods there that would be impacted with a new driveway. I think it's called the Tour of Anchorage Trail.
Yes.
All right. I see no one else in the queue. At this point, I'd like to open up public hearing with the petitioner come forward, please?
Good evening. My name is Laquita Chmielowski, CHMIELOWSKI. I'm a land use planner with Dell, and I'm here representing the Municipality of Anchorage Real Estate Department tonight. So as staff mentioned, this site selection study started with 83 sites that were located within the project area, and were whittled down to the 2 that we're talking about tonight. Some of the criteria that we looked at was location of the sites, if they were adjacent or nearby to arterial or a higher classified road. The size of the site needed to be a minimum of 8 acres. The current bus site is 9.5. The zoning, as staff mentioned, needed to be PLI I1 or I2 so that it was either a permitted or conditional use. And we were also looking at the surrounding areas to make sure the zoning, the location was compatible with the zoning around the site. We looked at accessibility. Did it have good ingress and egress from the site? We looked at environmental concerns, wetlands and waterway impacts, as well as soils and drainage and availability of utilities and acquisition costs. So all of this started with a need to consider relocating the bus parking for a development agreement that the municipalities entered in with the developer for a mixed-use development at the corner of Tudor and Elmore. The development would include a grocery store, housing, office, and medical office building. And so to make this development work, the bus barn would need to, or the bus parking would need to be relocated. And it's important to note that in the 2040 plan, this site's actually designated a town center, so relocating the facility and allowing the mixed-use development is a better use for that designation. So as was mentioned, the sites that we're looking at are 18 and 27. The idea is that once a site's selected, we'd be able to look at them in more detail, so looking at creating a site plan that has more detail to show site access, if we can fit all the bus parking on there, as well as the maintenance facilities. And then we'd be further vetting the entitlements, such as the wetlands permitting, the conditional use process, and building permit process. And with that, I can answer any questions.
Thank you. Questions for the petitioner? Mr. Spring.
Yeah, I'm particularly interested in Site 27, the one by the police department. What's your opinion about the vegetation there along Tudor? What's the quality of the existing vegetation there?
So there is some existing vegetation. I don't know the exact quality of it. We weren't looking at it from that in that much detail because we're just looking at a kind of a 40,000 foot level for this site selection.
Okay, and what kind of flexibility is there to build on that site? It's a pretty large site, right?
Correct.
Is there there's B wetlands and C wetlands, and the B wetland is over towards the east side
Correct.
of the site. Are there restrictions on that building there? Would the permit process end up forcing you to build in the C wetlands if that was the viable alternative instead of towards the eastern part of the site?
So those are the types of things we'd be looking at moving forward. The site was permitted previously when APD expanded their storage area, and within that permit was a site plan that actually showed additional parking within the area that we'd be looking at. But this development would require a new permit through the Army Corps of Engineers. So all of those sorts of details would be sorted out as we move forward in the process.
But in your experience in permitting, it's more likely that it'll be in the C wetland?
It is likely, especially since there are other facilities within that area that impacted the B and C wetlands that were permitted.
And I'm going to borrow a question that my neighbor brought up to me,
Sure.
but regarding the tour of Anchorage Trail on that site?
So there is a trail there, and so we would be looking at, if we took access off of Tudor Center Drive, we'd be looking at how we would incorporate that, and it would probably be a underpass that the driveway would go over and have a pedestrian tunnel. But again, those would be specifics that we looked at as we move forward.
If you didn't access Tudor, would there be an impact on the trail?
Not on that particular trail. No.
Only if there was access to
Correct.
Tudor Center, okay.
Thank you, Mr. Gardner.
I'm just curious. I noticed there was one of the comments here suggested that the municipality should look at kind of dividing the buses amongst different locations. And I was wondering if that was a thought that was considered at all, or in any case, if you have any thoughts or comments about that as a possibility.
So I will let the person here from the school district speak to that in more detail, but I think it comes down to an operational component that, it's easier to have all the buses and facilities in one location rather than trying to split them amongst the two.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question for either site, both sites. We heard in the comments, a lot of reasons some of the other sites were thrown out was because they were nearby residential development. And yet you're representing Real Estate Services, and the reason for moving the bus barn is to build a mixed-use residential development, and this recommendation is to put the bus barn directly across the street from it. So help me through the logic of that recommendation, whether that's compatible or not.
Well, I think the idea was to have it be in a similar location to where it is now, although the location where for Site 27 is a little bit further south, and although the mixed-use development would be nearby, it's not adjacent to any residential.
I guess my question is there's very much the potential, if not the intent, that it be future residential right across Elmore, at least as I understand the move, unless that residential won't happen.
So with the Tudor Elmore development, there will be residential as part of that development.
So there's no concern on behalf of the municipality that's sort of driving this that you create the same scenario that other neighbors were not excited about?
I think those are all the things that they're taking into consideration to get to this point. And then as we move forward, we can look at those things in more detail if we're looking at this particular site or if we're looking at Site 18.
Okay. And I noticed the size. I mean, it wasn't like there was a lot of room there beyond what was considered a minimum area. Is there some, at least preliminary assessment, that there can be some decent buffering, at least more so than what exists at today's facility today?
Yeah, there's been some just quick back of the envelope analysis, and it does appear that there would be more buffering than what's at the current site.
Okay. On number 18, I know you probably didn't go too far down this, but it talks about access either being, directly to Tudor or to get to the signal, getting over towards Campbell Airstrip and accessing the signal there. Is there no possibility of a signal at Tudor and Patterson?
So we didn't go that far in this analysis. That would be something that you'd look at in the next step as you look at the traffic impacts and what makes sense of where signals are located and if they're warranted. So that should be looked at
I mean,
further.
because to me it doesn't. My concerns are the way that's presented. If you have to go to the west to get to that signal, it's a very different, in my opinion, it's a different impact than actually right at Patterson, not to mention potentially providing an opportunity for people that live in the neighborhood to cross Tudor there, which they do anyway quite dangerously. So do you get any sense from the DOT that they would even be open to considering a signal at Tudor there?
I don't think that there's been a lot of conversations with them yet because we weren't at that point in the process.
Okay, great. Mr. Gardner, are you back in, or is that from before? Okay. Anybody else questions for the petitioner? You have plenty of time for rebuttal. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, at this point, I'd like to open the public hearing. As this rolls along, I assume, can you show of hands people intending to testify, just so I get a sense? Okay. So once you see somebody come up, if the next person could sort of queue up a little bit behind them so we could keep things rolling. When you come up, state your name, first and last name for the record, spell it for us, unless it's really blatantly obvious. We often need help with that. And I will remind you, 3 minutes for individuals, 5 minutes if you're part of a group. The little trigger here, the green light turns yellow when you have a minute left. And because we have a lot of people testifying tonight, we're going to cut off right at that buzzer, so just please be aware of that. So, sir, you look like you're ready to go.
Yes, I'm getting hungry. My name is Edward Mulesness, and the spelling of it can be found on page 128 if you want to do it that way with my address. I live in Stuckagon, and I need to disclose that I also spent 29 years in the UACC Community Council area as an active participant. I really appreciate staff's report. I don't find any problems with it, except I'm pleased that the chair has mentioned that we're across the street from Patterson on Site 18. Moving the bus barn 1,500 to 2,000 feet east to Site 27 will improve the air quality problems west of Elmore. That area has had significant air quality problems for years, and I'm quite well aware of them. I have read the UAACC comments, and I don't really have a problem with that because I understand where they're coming from. Moving the bus barn to 27 will likely have some minimal air quality impacts for the area between Checkmate Drive and Boniface off of Tudor, which is where I lived. But the terrain there would tend to keep the heavier gases lower and reduce the impact and have a reduced impact for that area. Moving the bus barn to Site 18, which Chairman nicely pointed out is Patterson and Tudor, and it shifts the University Area Community Council problem to the scenic foothills area and creates an air quality problem for them. And it creates a traffic problem. Moving to Site 18 creates a traffic problem and impacts the Fire Station 14 and everything else that staff reported on. And I think that my comments on page 128 pretty well state my opinions. And if you have any questions or want to ask any questions of this retired old engineer, you're welcome to do that. Otherwise, I'll go sit down.
Thank you for your testimony, and thank you for pointing out where your comments are located. I see no further questions.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Good evening. My name's Margaret Nelson. I'm a resident of Stuckagon Heights and here representing the Basher Community Council, of which there are 225 homes with countless neighbors in the area. You have found in the packet on page 125 our resolution, which we went through careful consideration of all the documents, and we took a complete poll of the neighbors, and overwhelmingly the neighborhood supported Site 27 and was against Site 18. I wanted to point out tonight, though, that something is a little bit disturbing to me, and that is your report states from Michelle and Francis, your director and senior planner, it says recommending Site 27, and it doesn't mention anything about consideration of Site 18. I know that in our community, since this is the document we were provided, many of our neighbors felt like Site 18 was not going to be discussed tonight. So I know there's a number of people who didn't attend tonight because of that. In September, more than 100 of our residents attended a public presentation given by Robin Ward. Not one person in that audience favored Site 18, but all supported Site 27. We believe that the intersection of Tudor Road and Campbell Airstrip Road is already way overtaxed. I haven't heard mention of it here tonight, but there is a new senior facility that is going in at that intersection. So that would be on the northwest side. That is going in and is already going to add to a significant number of facilities that are in the area, including the Botanical Gardens, the Benny Benson School, the municipal snow dump, many, many trails going into Bicentennial Park and the Chugach State Park, as well as Fire Station 14. As has been mentioned before, and someone who travels through that intersection daily, Only 5 or 6 cars can get through that light at any one time. If we add school buses, employees, and all the stuff that goes with that, we're going to be really overtaxing that intersection. And not to mention, if it's slippery, good luck getting through there, as well as if there's ever an emergency. There's no new egress going to be coming in and off Tudor Road, as I understand it. And so because of that, our community really doesn't believe that Site 18 is a viable location for this new facility. Bikers, skiers, joggers, walkers, fishers, wildlife viewers are all accessing this road through every single time of the year. This intersection has been very dangerous. We've had a number of fatalities over the years, at least 2 that I'm aware of, and I'm sure there have been more. There are more fatalities at this intersection than there is at Tudor and Boniface. So we're very concerned about that. Additionally, new houses are being built in our neighborhood. Probably the most important thing for you to know is this is the only access in and out of our neighborhood for Stuckhagen Heights. And so in conclusion, our group and our organization highly recommends approving the resolution before you that was presented. I think it's on page 5 in support of, let's see, I guess it's on page 8 in support of Site 27. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you for your testimony. I don't see any questions.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Hello.
Hi.
My name is Luann Pickard, P-I-C-C-A-R-D. And first I want to thank you all for your service to Anchorage, for letting us share the voice of our community and for including our inputs in your decision-making process. I would also like to thank Lance Pruitt, Pete Peterson, and Forrest Dunbar publicly for their active engagement with us and the surrounding neighborhoods to share information, listen to our concerns, and advocate for our community. Like I said, my name is Luann Pickard. I'm a 12-year resident of Stuckhagen Heights, but my family has lived in the UMed area since 1976. I'm speaking in opposition to relocating the ASD bus barn to Site 18 at the base of Campbell Airstrip Road near Fire Station 14, Benny Benson School, Far North Bicentennial Park, and the Alaska Botanical Gardens. I support Ms. McNulty and Mr. McLaughlin's recommendation from the Planning Department to relocate the bus barn to site number 27 near the current APD facility. Unfortunately, our Stuckhagen Heights neighborhood and the Bashir Community Council were not initially consulted regarding this project nor its impact because we were not within 500 feet of the project. I find that troubling, considering the impact that it has on our neighborhood. As a result, we've been catch-up mode since the Dowell report was prepared. Had we been consulted, I believe that site number 18 would have been rejected for similar reasons as some of the other sites that were considered. A poll taken of our neighborhood shows that 100% of Stuckhagen Heights residents oppose site number 18. Neighbors from Baxter to Patterson have also voiced their concerns. Another potential location off of Muldoon near Totem Theaters was rejected for zoning reasons, but also similar public outcry from residents. Fundamentally, an industrial bus barn does not belong in any residential area for reasons of safety, traffic congestion, noise, and pollution. The bus barn would house and maintain 120-plus school buses, other maintenance equipment, and accommodate numerous employee vehicles. As proposed, site number 18 would require those 120 buses, maintenance equipment, and additional vehicles to access Tudor Road from the small intersection at Campbell Airstrip Road and via a small, narrow school access road between Benny Benson School and the Botanical Gardens. Neither that small access road nor the intersection at Campbell Airstrip Road and Tudor were intended to accommodate this volume or type of traffic. For the following reasons, I oppose site number 18 and support number 27. Safety. Safety is one of the most fundamental issues. As Margaret said, there is only one road accessing Stuckhagen Heights and Far North Bicentennial Park. Consider the challenge for emergency responders if they had to navigate through a tangle of school buses exiting and entering our single road if there was an emergency in Stuckhagen Heights or Far North Bicentennial Park. Consider also the potential daily impact on Fire Station 14 if they had to navigate congestion resulting from those 120 buses coming and going at that small intersection just in front of the fire station in order to respond to any kind of emergency elsewhere.
Thank you for your testimony.
Okay.
All right. Folks, I'm going to ask, it's sort of what we do here, but we ask to refrain from applause or different types of remarks. It's just kind of what we try to do. Let's keep the reactions neutral. Thanks.
Hello, my name is Gary Steffens, Steffens, and I live in Kensington Park, directly across the street from where Site 18 was chosen. And they've said just about all the reasons you can't take Site 18 except hold up the fire people there for one incident, one time. Can anybody answer what the value of a life is from DOT? I'm retired deal, $8 million. You hold those people up, you set you up for yourself for a huge liability. I want to go back to what you said, Mr. Robinson. Option 2 was 18. Looks like it's off the books. Option 2 is Site 27, but there was option 0. And do people realize the planning department should be able to tell us? They're going to sell that property to a private interest to build medical facilities, which right now Providence does not fill their medical office. Native facility doesn't. The medical facilities on the corner of Tudor and Lake Otis have never filled those medical offices. Number 2, they says, oh, for housing and all this. Right now, this city is in a slump that they cannot see the end of. They don't know, and you have vacancy rates running from every level from low income to high income that are near the 20% vacancy rate. Number 3, you want to build a grocery store in this facility, something else. Across the street from the site you were looking at, there's a mall that's about failing. So these amenities that this private sector that you want to sell this to do not make sense at this time in the economy. And so this is what you're going to sell it for. There's a real physical cost to the taxpayer associated to relocating to either of these sites. What is that? You've had time to look at it. What is the cost to the taxpayer? When they say, oh, it's only going to be $6 per 100,000, $3 per 100,000. I will tell you, I've lived in my house since 1992. When I moved in there, I looked this morning, $1,174 a year worth of taxes. Okay, I looked at last year's taxes. What are the taxes? Over $6,000, all right? We need to go with option 0. Stop this right now. Do not increase a greater industrial footprint in a city that has plenty of sites that may be toxic or not that should be cleaned up and built onto before we go expanding into pristine or other environments that they've looked at from the 40,000 foot level rather than getting right down and look at what you're doing. So my thing is, yeah, 18 should be off the books, but you better take a look at moving to 27 and what are the reasons we're doing that and what is the physical cost to the taxpayer? Can we justify that in a time right now when this city has a hard time meeting a budget, the expenditure of building whole new facilities? So that's all I have to say, but you really need to look at option 0 here.
Thank you for your testimony. I'm just going to respond and say, you're entitled to your opinion. Our review here is really limited here tonight.
That's correct.
So I hope everybody doesn't go down that path of saying why we're here today. So we're just going to evaluate the site selection, and people that are at a higher pay grade than us are going to evaluate what the deal is, right? And so you will have an opportunity in front of the assembly. But I get it. But please, again, we're not going to go there because that's not what we're here to go to.
You were the one that said option 0. All right. I just reiterated what you said.
I didn't say option 0.
Yes, you did. You said
no.
2, 1, and 0. 0 was not moving the site.
I said we could recommend that the sites are not appropriate. We would not recommend that there's not a reason for the site. The reason for the site is something that we're not debating here. That's not on our table. We would say we could evaluate and say neither site is appropriate. There's a difference.
Right. It should have been, including in this, the option of doing nothing, leaving the site alone. We haven't heard the argument for doing nothing.
That's not what we're here to do, sir.
Yeah, and that's what you're not here to do, and you should be doing.
So you heard your assembly members. You're welcome to go. I think Forrest and Peter are waiting for a phone call right now.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Who's ready to testify?
Good evening. My name is Caroline Ahrens, Ahrens. I am a resident of Stuckagon Heights, but I'm also a substitute teacher at Baxter and Scenic Park. And I just want to, anytime there is air quality issues, the people that air quality issue hits are the old and the young. And just remind you, along Tudor Road, you have now a brand new 160 unit senior citizen facility. Are you going to trap those people inside when the cold air from Campbell Creek Science Center holds all the particulate down? There is a daycare right across the street from Site 18. There is an elementary school down Baxter Road. There's an elementary school down Patterson. They're out at recess. They gather in the mornings before they go into school. You have kids waiting for the buses on the sidewalks. This is a residential area. A bus barn does not belong in a residential area. If you had walked Site 18 and not looked from above, it's a hill. In order to make that flat enough to house 125 buses and at least 100 cars of people that work there, you're going to have to remove a whole bunch of soil. Probably several thousand cubic yards of soil. And those giant tanks that are there now, most of the time you don't see that because they're hidden behind the hill. So if you add noise pollution from the buses, beep, beep, beeping early in the morning to all the neighbors who don't want to get up at 5 o'clock, you're going to have the pollution from the exhaust being diesel. You're having diesel emissions near wetlands, near a stream, where people recreate, where there's moose, where there's bear. It's not a good combination. I don't know that much about 27 because I did not walk it, but I would suggest an overview is not a really good way to look at that. And I see I'm lit. So anyway, I just want you to consider the people that are young and the people that are old that have to breathe the air that's being polluted by the buses. We're a residential neighborhood. We're not industrial. Find a different place.
Thank you. I got a question from Ms. Bailey.
I actually just wanted to thank you for your comments regarding the air pollution and specifically the note of that there are the daycare centers and the senior centers right in that immediate vicinity. I think those comments are specifically of interest and at least are helpful for me in making this decision.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. My name is William Tracy. That's Tracy. I live directly below site number 18 off of Tudor Road, down by Baxter Bog. If you're not familiar with the site, we've already pretty much addressed all the accessibility issues, and the planning department doesn't recommend site number 18 because of that. But let's talk some more about the pollution issues here. Site number 18 is at the top of a hill. It's parallel to Tudor Road. The grade in the area all goes downhill towards Baxter Bog directly north. Now, the site under the proposal needs to be leveled completely. The proposed site will be at approximately 310 feet of elevation, parallel to Tudor Road. Baxter Bog is approximately 300 yards downhill from the proposed site, directly downhill. And the problem here is that diesel exhaust emissions are Group 1 carcinogen. And you've got diesel vapors, heavier than air, and they're going to sink through the normal atmosphere. So exhaust and diesel vapors from the proposed site are going to sink downhill directly towards Baxter Bog, and they're going to accumulate at that lower level. Now, Baxter Bog is not only a city park, but it's a wildlife preservation area as well. And on top of any air quality issues that you're going to have around this, we also have the possibility of groundwater contamination as well. And again, from that site, the elevation is all going directly north downhill towards Baxter Bog. So any runoff from that site and the groundwater will eventually pollute that area. And I think we've addressed everything else. That's all I have.
Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you. My name is Ken Pravatsky. It's Privatsky. I have nothing of length to add. My wife and I have been residents of Stuckagin Heights for 25 years. And we're very accustomed to approaching that intersection and sliding, and we view it to be very dangerous. So we're very concerned, particularly this time of year, for that intersection. But it's not just the wintertime. It was mentioned briefly that is also the location for the dump site for the municipal snow. There's a lot of 5-ton dump trucks that go in there in the wintertime. We haven't had much snow, but they will be coming, and that's another consideration there. But what you've heard about a single egress and ingress, we've just come off an earthquake. In the summertime up there, we fear for fires all summer long. That is our only way out of that community. So as it gets bogged down in any way, be it by another bus or another 100 buses, then we're very concerned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Rachel Boudreau, Boudreau, and I'm here on behalf of the Northeast Community Council. If I'm not mistaken, it's one of the largest community councils in the municipality. And we also have a resolution. I believe it's on page 35, but I could be wrong about that. And I'm just here to reiterate that we do not support site number 18, and we support site 27, and believe that should be the only site considered for the bus barn. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Stephen Mierop, M-I-E-R-O-P. I live in Stuckagin Heights. For me, I guess it devolves down to safety. That intersection is a scary intersection. Because of the speeds, I don't know, people are getting out of town and they're just speeding up and they're coming down the hill, and in the wintertime they're sliding down the hill. And all the accidents that I've seen at the intersection over the years, and I've lived in Stuckagin since 2015, but I used to live on Baxter Bog, so I'm very familiar with the intersection. And I've seen all the accidents I've ever seen over the years have been very, very high-speed accidents, some fatality accidents. All the safety issues, the traffic safety issues are already baked into Site 27 because you're just moving it, 1,000 feet, 1,200. I mean, you're just moving it a little bit. I wanted to testify here so my fellow residents can raise their hand if they want to behind me. Many times when I've come out in the morning and I try to make the left turn, I can't make the left turn because of the oncoming traffic on Baxter. That's one thing. If it's me trying to squeeze in with other cars to get on to Tudor Road, it's a whole other thing if it's a bus or a number of buses. So, the safety issue. Also, how many of you live in a lives-only fire area where the fire department's not even going to attempt to save your structure? Okay, think about that. Lives only. That's what Stuckagin is. It's a lives-only area. So if you do anything, if anything happens to impede the access to our community, it just devolves down to safety for me. And I understand the air pollution problem is going to be, both places, and I'm sympathetic to that issue. But I think the safety issues, there isn't a lives-only issue down at the Tudor at the 27 location. The issues they don't even compare. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mark Myers, M-Y-E-R-S, and I'd like to testify again in opposition to Site 18 and in favor of Site 27 as an individual. I've lived in Stuckagin Heights for 28 years, so I've seen that area before the development and the Benny Benson School, the fire station, or the Botanical Gardens, and we've seen dramatic improvements in the roads. But we've pretty much reached, I think, the point where the roads can handle the existing traffic level, but more traffic level on that would require significant re-engineering. And if I could, I have a long experience in managing state and natural resources and lands and planning, as well as on the federal level. And so when I look at this, one of the first things you do is you look at the maps, and you contrast the maps of these two sites. You see two very different sites in terms of their physical attributes and their connectivity and their population densities and their current land uses. So really the sites are not that comparable when you really look at them. You have, as has been pointed out, really good infrastructure in Site 27, road structure. You have part of what is part of Bicentennial Park, which is, again, with allowable use for additional development, but you have significant ecosystem fragmentation that's already occurred in Site 27, as well as the infrastructure and the use. Here you have an area that's directly apart and akin to this larger preserved ecosystem, which is one of the major recreational user areas in Anchorage, which is itself unique in the way it connects back up to the Chugach Mountains and the state forest and land. So you've got an intact ecosystem. The comments that were made about the hydrology, you can see here, right where Patterson Road is where the creeks are coming in, and I would be willing to bet that's where your Class A wetlands are. So I think it'd be very difficult, probably, to be able to put a road in there to intersect and come back into Patterson, but it would need to be looked at very severely. So I think that's difficult. As people mentioned, the terrain is not level there. It's steep, and it requires significant modification. The final thing on water pollution issues is that the classic municipal challenge in terms of groundwater pollution, it relates to blacktop surfaces and the petroleum runoffs from those surfaces. Again, you are putting that into active water system that will end up in Baxter Bog. So again, comparing these sites from a map perspective, from an ecological perspective, and from an infrastructure perspective, Site 27 is clearly superior, and Site 18 is very challenged, I think. Thank you.
Thank you.
I bet you guys are waiting for somebody to come up here and vote against 18, or for 18, I mean. My name's Wendy Moe, M-O-E. I hate public speaking. This is the second time I find myself here. Recently I was here to talk about Station 14 and losing the possibility of losing our tender. I'm new to Stuckagon Heights, and what I'm finding with this process and listening to the agenda item before this one and this is that it sounds like we do some site analysis, but we don't really look all the way through the process. So here we are talking about potential sites, but then once the site's approved, then we have all this other work to do. Just building a home, I spent a year and a half with the architect really working hard on that, and then it made the building process a lot easier, and by the end we were only $6,000 over budget, which is pretty amazing, I think. So I guess my view of this process is, you know, you're only looking at a portion of it and not the whole picture. I won't say the same things everybody else has said about the safety and stuff. That is an issue. The name rings true, Stuckagon Heights. We will be stuck again up there trying to get out of our community. To touch on the safety really quick and the lives only thing, I lived in Spenard and I had a house fire once, and a fire truck was already en route to an alarm call when they saw the smoke at my house. They arrived within minutes of the fire actually starting, and they were able to save my structure. But again, that was minutes, and the fire truck was already en route. So the potential for safety issues and not being able to get up to help people and then out is definitely a big concern. It takes me about 10 to 15 minutes to get to my home. I live at the very end of Basher Road. And so, you know, definitely safety is a concern. We have, they said, new housing going in. Lots of large families up there, believe it or not. There's at least 12 to 16 kids in a block radius of my neighborhood, which was really surprising to me because I thought I'd be moving where there would be no kids for my kids to play with. So anyway, I mean, having this, the dilemma that you guys have. I do think Site 27 is a better option just because it does seem to have a better infrastructure to support the bus system. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Brad Campbell, Campbell, an 18-year resident of Stuckagon Heights, and I'm here to urge you all to oppose site number 18 for all the reasons that you've already heard, and I'm not going to repeat them, but they're all valid. They're all important to us as residents of Stuckagon Heights. And as a side note, we already lose that road one day a year during the Mayor's Marathon. It's a horrible backlog. It takes it takes nearly an hour to get up Campbell Airstrip Road from Tudor back to our homes because the road is all plugged up for runners and walkers and whatnot. We know how disruptive that can be. We know how disruptive it could be with all of this additional traffic from the bus barn. And the talk about environmental concerns, air pollution, water pollution runoff, soil contamination. You know, there's a lot of wildlife that lives in that area. We have lynx, moose, bear, even some coyotes. Those animals would be affected just as much as we would be. And I would hate to see that happen. I'm not a bunny hugger, but I would hate to see the animals, the wildlife that's in that area that's been there forever, to be negatively impacted by this decision. Now, there are 9 selection criteria. 4 of them state that Site 18 is only partially met, and Site 27 is met. And there's a recommendation on page 7 that indicates the department recommends Site 27. This is what I would urge you to take a look at. Look at what the experts have talked about. You've heard a lot from us about what we're concerned about, but look at what the experts are suggesting. And please do not select Site 18. Thank you.
Thank you.
Richard Braun, B-R-A-U-N. Don't pick 18 for all the reasons you've just heard. I live very close to where that Baxter Senior Center is being built right now, and use that intersection daily practically. Very familiar with the traffic pattern there and the 50-plus mile-an-hour traffic coming around that big bend and going downhill, and all of a sudden the light turns red and it gets exciting. You mentioned that you're only here to approve for your criteria. I don't think I heard what is your criteria for saying yes or no to something?
So is that a question to me?
Well,
so
I'd like an explanation of that, because evidently some of the things people are bringing up aren't in your criteria, and it really doesn't matter.
Well, what I would suggest is you grab one of those staff packets, and the gentleman right before.
I have one, but I didn't get through all that.
Well, just
before the meeting.
First 6 pages.
Okay, I'll read
9
that.
criteria, and we're going to find.
Is bus count traffic in that?
Traffic is, yes.
Okay.
Transportation.
No, do you know what the bus count will be at that intersection of the light?
No.
Because those buses not only make a trip out in the morning, they come back in the morning. They take special trips out for field trips and other projects that schools request a bus for. And then in the afternoon, those buses go out to go pick up kids, and then they come back, and you should get a good bus count there to try to get all through that one little bitty 2-lane intersection there. In addition to what the 29,000 or whatever it was, he said that comes down Tudor Road and et cetera. Those buses don't leave the bus barn to go get kids until they're about 40 degrees inside. So the maintenance guys start those buses up, let them idle, the ones that are outside especially, until the buses are warm enough that it's suitable to put kids into. That's a lot of idling time every day. That's a lot of exhaust, cold exhaust coming out of a bus that's been parked overnight. Consider that. Fire station, 14. How are they going to get out when there's a whole line of buses parked in front of them waiting for the red light to change? I don't see how they're going to, maybe they can go in the left lane and get around them, but I wish them a lot of luck. So anybody that's calling for Fire Station 14, you might have to wait during the winter months. 18 is not a good site. And I know you made a joke, but it's kind of serious for a situation like for those of us. You say you're going to mess with my shortcut. Do you have a bias against 27 and for 18?
Thank you for your testimony.
It'd be nice to know.
I would have disclosed that, sir. I'm going to challenge everybody to please listen to the testimony that you've heard before you and challenge you to bring up new information. If you just want to say ditto to everything that we've heard the issues that everyone else has heard. So if you have some new testimony, please come on forward to testify.
My name is Charles Sloan, S-L-O-A-N. I agree with all the arguments against Site 18, and I don't advocate for 27. I think you gave us three options to this group. One site, two sites, or zero. Excuse me, or zero. And that's what I'm for. I see no reason at all to move the bus barn. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you. And again, my point, because I was trying to be helpful earlier, maybe it wasn't helpful, but our goal here is to evaluate these two sites relative to the approval criteria for a site selection. Not whether or not it should, we should be doing that, right? You know what I mean? So, I'm just saying, I haven't heard anything. We haven't heard anything related to Site 18 at all. 27, right? So at this point, our evaluation, just so you know, if there are people here to testify related to 18, we'd like to hear that testimony as well. But thank you, sir, for yours.
You're welcome.
I keep getting them wrong, 27. I think I work somehow clockwise or counterclockwise. Anyway. All right, anyone else wishing to testify, come on forward.
Hi, my name is Tracy Reno, R-E-N-O. I live in the Scenic Foothills area. I just went on the record that I have concerns about the Title 21 500-foot notification process, and I don't know if that's your responsibility or not, but I just wanted on the record that this is a public comment period, and if people who are impacted don't get the notice or don't have the information, then it's hard for us to come say something about it. So it's been a process that has been a concern for all of us from the beginning, from over a year ago when it started with the Totem Theater area. And so I just wanted to bring that to your attention. I'm not sure if that's your responsibility, but I wanted it to be known. I recommend that you support the location next to APD, which is the Site 27, and I'd like you to just think about Site 18 and the impact to Benny Benson and Scenic Park schools, because those buses coming out, and for your comment, it's going to be split. So some of them are going to go half this way down Tudor, and the other half are going to have to go this way down Tudor. And so that'll be about 75-75 is what Robin Ward has said in the past at previous meetings. The impact going across the fire department and the Benny Benson school area trying to get out onto that road is going to be serious, not only with, again, the air quality, but the traffic and the impact to those kids. So I don't recommend it being near any kind of housing or any kind of school. So I wish you would support the other location near APD. Thank you.
Just on the notice thing, you're suggesting so what happens is there's specific sites and then there's people within a certain area of that site.
Yes.
And then beyond that, it's typical then to notice through the community council system.
Correct.
So are you saying that the Scenic Foothills was not notified through community council because it technically wasn't in Scenic Foothills?
Initially, when the Totem Theater started last year, Scenic Foothills, it was in our community council. We were not given notice. 500 feet around that location was the only people that were notified.
Yeah, and I would concur that that's a problem.
It is a problem.
Yeah, agreed. Your community council should be noticed on a big issue like this. Frankly, for any zoning, or there's a way to sign up, and you should be noticed.
And the second round, so this round, they did a better job. We've actually got onto Facebook and the Nextdoor, and that's how we found out about it initially. We didn't find out about it from the city. We didn't find out from the little note cards. Our representative Lance Pruitt came out and we got on social media, and that's how we got it out. So I just want to say if there's a way for you guys to control how far out that reaches, that 500-foot mark from this location, Site 18, who lives within 500 feet? How many
No,
people?
I guess I'm not suggesting we debate the footage.
No, I
What I'm
agree.
saying is that the community council needs to be notified, and then you have to be engaged in that network. That's the only way that we can sort of cast a wider net. But I really
I agree.
appreciate your points.
Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to testify?
Hi, my name is B. Campbell, and I'm a bus driver. And I just want to say, whatever site you choose, make sure there's more than one way for us to get to our runs, because all the kids will be late. We also start our own buses. We have a pre-trip time, and we start our buses. We get them as warm in the time that we have. We don't idle for more than 10 or 15 minutes. We'd like to get them warmer. But I suggest that when you do pick a site, maybe build a building like People Mover has. All the emissions that everybody doesn't want, we smell every day because our buses are so cold. But whatever site you pick, 18 to me is not reasonable because there's one way in and one way out. Right now we have two ways to get out, but we have multiple avenues. Once we get out on Tudor, once we get out on Elmore, we can go Dowling, we can go Martin Luther King. One side, Site 18 brings you out on Campbell to Tudor, and then you go north or south. And it takes a lot of extra time to make our runs. So that was the only point I wanted to make. Please make sure we have more than one way in and out of our bus barn.
Thanks. I got a question from Mr. Anderson for you.
Just a comment. I wanted to say thank you for your testimony. It's helpful to hear from somebody that would be using the new facility.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right. Thank you. Lance Pruitt. I happen to represent the area down in Juneau in House District 27. I also happen to be a resident of the Kempton Hills area. Thank you, first, for giving us the opportunity, and my community, my neighbors, to be able to come out and talk about this. Actually, thank you for the planning department for listening to the concerns that were brought forward by the individuals that I have the opportunity to represent, as well as following the process this time. It was followed much better this time than it was a year ago, and I do want to give credit where credit is due and appreciate that was done. My constituents have highlighted a lot of things that I'm not going to reiterate because they've done a phenomenal job. But there are a couple of things that I do want to add to that, and that is also the impact to all commuters. Remember, the people that are going through this area are not just people that live in these direct neighborhoods. Traffic studies have shown that a large portion of these people are also, they live in Eagle River, they live in the valley. They are using this as a transiting point to get out to where they live. And so putting an additional amount of traffic in that area potentially will add to the delay and the backup for even the commuting public that would take place. The other thing is, Mr. Chair, you actually highlighted something. You had some questions earlier that I thought were very good questions. And one of them was related to that being able to open up and add another light. We did have a conversation. Actually, Commissioner Meyer spoke earlier. He was talking about the ecological differences. But in the previous meeting with Robin Ward, she had highlighted that that really is not an option to be able to put a light there. And it's especially not an option to be able to put a driveway that goes to that light. So what you are talking about is that the bulk of this traffic, because you can't turn left without going through there, will go through two things. One, it will have to go through the parking lot of Benny Benson. And I think that's something that's very important to consider. You're going to have children, you're going to have young individuals in that area, you're going to have buses going through there. Then they're going to have to take that left onto the road. There's no way to really change the makeup of that intersection. You just can't. Whereas on Site 27, you do have, off of Tudor, off of the main road, you have access points from which that they can get into the various areas that they need to be. So with that, thank you for giving us the opportunity. Thank you for listening. And I would ask that Site 18, you do not move that one forward. Of the options that are available, 27 I do feel is most appropriate. Thank you again.
Can I just ask, and I'm a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but it seems like the analysis is largely based on land that the municipality already already owns. I mean, there is a sort of a criteria that talks about the feasibility. I don't suppose there's a state grant out there to help them acquire a private site anywhere.
Well, I think there's not a lot of money for any state grants these days.
Fair enough.
So, but anyways, I do appreciate that.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
I did have a quick question, if you had a second.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you for your testimony. You mentioned that Robin Ward indicated that the signal at Patterson Street was not feasible, or exactly how did you say that?
She had indicated that she did not feel that was feasible for she had several different reasons. For sure, in terms of using it as a driveway so that you could actually have access from the proposed site that we're talking about and using it for the buses to get on. She pretty much nixed that because, and I actually think Commissioner Meyer highlighted that you would have to go across some, I believe it's Class A wetlands to make that happen.
That is true. Actually, so as an engineer, of course, I don't pretend like I know exactly what DOT wants, but it is at a probably half-mile section. I know there's serious obstacles. We've already heard about the grade challenges, the Class A wetlands, but you might note that Parcel 27 has Class A wetlands also on the east half. So there's some significant utility impacts right there at Patterson, but I keep thinking that if 18 were to be feasible at all, pretty much what I hear, at least what I'm hearing, I'm believing that maybe the only way it could work is if there was a separate access from that Patterson intersection. But it doesn't solve all the problems that we've heard tonight, some of the air quality problems, but that is the only way it could even be feasible. But the cost of a signalized intersection could easily run, $300,000 to $400,000. So not like it's not possible. It's not economically feasible for the comparison, maybe.
And I think that's an appropriate point. I think she was highlighting basically the discouragement that we would probably receive from DOT. If I did say that maybe that it was off the table or not possible, that was probably misspeaking, but she highlighted the difficulties that would create. I would highlight, and add one thing, because you did mention it. Benny Benson, the school Benny Benson, is literally right beside this site. So you do have a school that is right beside this site, and you would the potential of children, as mentioned earlier, and the impact to them. I think that should also be considered as well. So, anyways, Thank you.
We must be winding down. Anyone else wishing to testify? And like I said, if you're next up, it would help if you could come down. Just keep things rolling.
Hi, my name is Scott Wunderode. I live at 6839 East Tudor Road, which is right in between Patterson and Campbell Creek Airstrip, and not far off of Tudor. I haven't lived there very long, but since I've been there, it's incredible the speed the people are coming around that corner as they come into town in the morning. And then I agree that Robin said there's just no way they're ever going to put any lights. They have no control over that. And the site is, just can't be done without some sort of traffic control being put in. So besides all the pollution and all the other things that have been talked about, I think safety for the kids getting on the bus and trying to come out onto Tudor Road from that little access road, which they can't put a light on, not to mention the other light is, not... really up to snuff for what we're talking about here. So I just, discourage Site 18. I think that Site 27 isn't far from where it's been all these years. And I like the point you made about, why are they going to build houses down there right next to it and have to move it? And, there shouldn't be any houses built near it. Nobody wants to live there and smell that. So thank you.
Hey, could you spell your last name for us, please, sir?
Yes, Winterrowd, Winterrowd.
Great.
Opposite of Summer Street.
Yeah, I got you. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Sean Trasky, Trasky, and we live off of Patterson, and I agree with everything everybody's said already. The other two safety concerns I would mention is as you're headed west on Tudor, like from Patterson. That hill is incredibly slick, and to turn left is not always safe. And so turning all those buses into there is going to just add to that. And if you remember, I don't know if you guys remember, a couple of years ago, DOT did a bunch of patch testing around town for areas that were high accident because of slipping and stuff. So they put in different material in the roadways to test to see if they could control the people going through the intersection when they didn't want to sliding through. And that's one of the test spots, right? Because we're a high, I don't know how to say that. You slid through the intersection, right? And so for trucks to be able to stop, or the buses to be able to stop there and turn left into there is just going to add to that issue. And the other thing is, as a park user coming from Patterson, it's shocking how high foot traffic that area has. Like, I have never been on the sidewalk where I didn't see other people out on the sidewalk. There's tons of people riding bikes and running, walking their dogs, constantly accessing the park through there. So it's a pedestrian safety issue as well right there.
Great.
That's it.
Thanks. Anyone else? Last call.
I feel like David against Goliath. I'm representing the University Area Community Council, and we would be opposing Site 27. I am Barbara Garner. I'm on the University Area Community Council's Executive Board, and I'm speaking on behalf of UACC. I have lived on East 42nd Avenue as a homeowner since October of 1970. I will read testimony written by Paul Stang, the UACC president, who's currently traveling out of state. The Bus Barn study report has a fatal flaw. It did not address the serious air quality and health problems caused by the toxic fumes that the 125 school buses spew out during the warm-up process early in the mornings. This is especially a problem during cold winter mornings when the bus's concentrated diesel fumes are blocked by frequent atmospheric inversions from moving upward and dissipating. Instead, the fumes slowly move north and northwest and linger in UACC residential neighborhoods and Providence Hospital buildings for most of the morning. We strongly recommend that the P&Z stop this selection process in its tracks until a reasonable solution to the air pollution issue is found. Furthermore, with the exception of a mere mention of our request for an air quality study, the staff reports omits and apparently ignores the recommended details and purpose of an air quality study and our other comments. Since the 1990s, many UACC area residents have suffered serious ill health effects from the existing bus barn. Now, Muni Planning is recommending location Site 27, that is a stone's throw from the existing bus barn site. In effect, the Planning Department is recommending that the severe air pollution ill effects on UACC residents and Providence Hospital continue unabated. This is unfair and inequitable. And I want you to now look at some things that I brought. I brought a map, and I think maybe it's been passed out, hopefully.
We have it.
Okay, yep. There are two sides to the map, and I will share with you why this UAC neighborhood called the University, it's the UMed Gateway neighborhood, which is between Tudor Road and 40th Avenue, even 40th Avenue before it was extended. There's something down there on the south side of the bus barn, which is on page 1. And it shows there blue. That's Campbell Creek. In the morning, on those inversion mornings, when it's cold, has to be below 20 degrees because that's when it occurs. We can look outside and we can tell that it's an inversion morning because the stack on the top of the Native Medical Center has something passing straight up in the air with no wind. What happens is the ambient air coming off the Chugach Mountains flows down, finding the low spots, and it's following North Fork and South Fork, Campbell Creek. It comes over just below where the bus barn and the public building is, where, I can't remember the name, right south of there, right near Martin Luther King. And it flows up to where the buses are all warming up, and it pushes those fumes west, northwest, and north. When they go west, they're going on up to past the Tozier track and bumping up into that Drumlin Hill, on which all those residences all along that side are affected by the fumes, the diesel, the fumes. It passes north to right into my bedroom, northwest. And it affects all of us in an area where a lot of the residents are renters, and some of us are longtime people who live there. We've been affected ever since the early 1990s. I am now subject to using an inhaler because when I climb a hill hiking or bike up a hill, I can't get enough oxygen into my muscles. And the pulmonologist says my lungs have been affected because I've had all these diesel fumes coming to my house on inversion mornings. So it's very, very uncomfortable. I'm not the only one. I have a neighbor on another street, and I even get nauseous with all the fumes coming into the house. Another neighbor, her brother is vomiting every time it occurs. I have another neighbor on 41st. She also is vomiting because these fumes come in. Please remember that we're trying to build a place here for people who want to live in an area that could use an expansion. The housing projected is pretty much for senior citizens. They want to be near the medical centers. They want to be able to have a grocery nearby. I live in a food desert. We have to go miles in order to get groceries. And it's not like they're going to go across the street. It's projected that a major grocery store will go in there, an office building. And of all things, you're putting a Department of Health building in that site.
Thank you for your testimony. Danielle's in the queue for you.
First, just want to thank you for, this is obviously a perspective that we haven't heard yet today, is someone actually addressing Site 27. One thing I wanted to ask is that in moving the bus barn, if it was moved to Site 27, it would be moving slightly further east. So as opposed to, not that there is an option of keeping it where it is now as a temporary option, but by moving it slightly east, would that at all appease any concerns that you have over towards what is currently the status quo?
There will be fumes there. Those fumes will still be pushed by the ambient air coming down off the mountain. It will now be heading onto the Native Medical Campus. You're going to affect more people. On the other side, it shows it all the way up to Muldoon Road, how that stream works. And throughout that, there are fumes that are going to be addressed by anybody that's near where those buses are warming up. They start warming up at 4:15 in the morning, 4:15 in the morning. By 4:30, it's in my bedroom. And I live over near the Providence Horizon House on East 42nd and Folker Street. That's how fast it happens. They dissipate slightly after 9 p.m. when the buses are off doing other things or coming back. By the time 11 o'clock, 11:30, when the sun comes up, the sun makes them break up and go away. So the entire morning is from about 4:30 on, for example, it's bad. And I wouldn't want anybody to be there. I don't favor anything that's going on Site 18 either. They have really legitimate reasons. But the area 27 is a health issue, a serious health issue. And you cannot let them stay there. I have a recommendation. Years ago, there was a bus barn, an enclosed bus barn that was enclosed. I can't even talk. Enclosed in a closed bus barn, included in a bond issue with a group of others. The voters failed it. There's nothing there. They even considered putting them in with the people mover buses. That became not a possibility. I think there's about 40 of them in there. A good idea. If you're going to think about that as a possibility on Site 27, that's where it possibly could go, but it must be enclosed. And you must deal with the fumes that come from these buses. There is even a monitor that was on the corner of Dale Street and Tudor on top of an insurance company. Wendy's is there now. And that was measuring PM10. There was not a monitor for the PM 2.5, of which samples along the side of Tudor Road were picked up, and they are included in there. We're breathing that. And that's, I think, a valid consideration for everybody who lives in the area. So many people it's a zone R2 and R3. My home is even zoned after we bought it, long time ago, 1970. And we didn't know that we were in an R3 zone, single-family home. And across the street in many other areas, there are a lot of R2s, there are a lot of renters in the area, there are some of us long-timers who've been there all these decades, and we're still there. It's convenient to a lot of things in Anchorage, especially being in the medical area. It's a positive, absolutely a positive. So we don't want you to continue to put these buses in an area where even more people and medical services are going to be affected by diesel fumes that will go on those inversion days. And they do happen anytime it's below plus 20 degrees on a clear, cold day.
Thank you. I actually have a question for staff relating to this, and so I don't want to send you away in case other people have questions. In looking at evaluation criteria number 7, in the issue of air pollution, I don't see that adequately addressed in your analysis of environmental sustainability of the site. Was air pollution addressed, and was there any air quality survey done or anything in that regards that addressed this issue?
Well, the site selection study did not evaluate the sites based on air quality or on traffic. Those have been reserved for the conditional use permit public hearing that you'll review in the future for the eventual site. The thinking is that we have to have a site before we, I guess the applicant reviews some of these issues. Now, the conditional use permit will be a public hearing, and approval criteria number 6 and 7 both deal with impacts on impacts on neighboring properties. And with the forthcoming application, once we have a site, that will obviously have to be addressed adequately, both for the planning department's review and for your review. And if the commission's dissatisfied with the answers provided at that time, you can deny the conditional use permit or return it for redesign or add stipulations and conditions.
Thank you. I would just say that it's, as far as addressing environmental sustainability, it does not appear as that was completely addressed. I understand it will get referenced at another point in time. However, I think that's something that in the future should be in these original packets.
Through the chair, Ms. Bailey, if I could just argue that point, my review of that approval criteria, I viewed it a little bit more narrowly, and that it was primarily about wetlands and environmental impacts to the site itself, not the impact of potentially, exhaust on neighboring properties. That is explicitly called out in at least in one of the approval criteria, number 6 and probably number 7 too, of the conditional use permits approval criteria as required by Title 21.
Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony.
Hello, my name is Leslie Tuvenen, T as in Tom, U, O, V as in Victory, I-N-E-N. I'm a member of the UACC Community Council, and I live near Castle Heights in East Anchorage. So I agree that Site 18 is not viable, as eloquently expressed by so many others. But I remain concerned that Site 27 may be equally not a viable option. Not being a chemist, I took a moment this afternoon to look up briefly the health hazards of diesel exhaust and diesel particulate matter, and there is a 2013 OSHA alert hazard alert that briefly says short-term exposure to high concentrations of diesel exhaust and diesel particulate matter can cause headaches, dizziness, and irritation of the eyes, nose, and throat severe enough to distract or disable miners and other workers. Prolonged DE/DPM exposure can increase the risk of cardiovascular, cardiopulmonary, and respiratory disease and lung cancer. And along with this, I pick up a sense that Site 27 is not seen as being part of a residential community, but that would be erroneous thinking. Perhaps there isn't a house right there on the corner, but as Barbara mentioned, if you look right across the street, you're at the Alaska Native Medical Health Center campus, and you're looking at people who are already health challenged. Kitty corner from there, College Gate, the Castle Heights residential area, and the university residential housing, which houses somewhere in the vicinity of 950 students and staff, plus other neighborhoods nearby. And these neighbors will suffer certainly from air quality issues, but traffic and other concerns as well. Any environmental assessment that's done as part of your criteria has to include the human environment and human health, and those things also impact wildlife. So I think that some more serious thought needs to be given to this before anybody recommends moving forward with Site 27. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Devin O'Driscoll. I live in Scenic Foothills. I'm a member of the Community Council there. I agree with the majority, oppose Site 18, and I'm also for the air quality testing at the current site and Site 27 if we're to move forward. I know you spoke about earlier that it's not your agenda today about not moving it, but I don't know if this is a question for staff or our other elected officials that are here today, but why the move? We're talking about building stuff that was pointed out earlier by another gentleman as things that we already have in the area. To move it 1,000 feet to the east, 1,500 feet to the east. The things to build are unattractive at this time. I don't know if it's a longer future plan that we're looking at the 2040 or something like that, but I think that should come into consideration. Senior housing is one of the things. We're talking about air pollution, and it mostly affects the young and the old, and you're going to build that in the site there. If it is something that's long-term that wants to be built as a 2040 plan or something like that, why not build at Site 27 and save the taxpayers the money of that move? The money saved could go to something like air pollution mitigation or a building that was spoke about by a bus driver earlier today. Either way, I think that we need to do an air quality study to move forward with the move or without the move. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I get you to state your name again?
Devin O'Driscoll. My last name is spelled O''D-R-I-S-C-O-L-L.
Great. And I'm going to just defer to the petitioner, the woman that'll come up after the testimony, and she can tackle the why question or the timeline question on behalf of the municipality.
Thank you.
Yeah. Anybody else wishing to testify? I think we're getting to it. All right. Going once. Last call. All right. I'd like to invite the petitioner back up. And following their testimony, we will close the public hearing likely. So just letting people know.
So I think it's important to note that this is a process that we're in the beginning of, that whatever site is selected to move forward tonight is when we get into the details, such as the traffic impact analysis, air quality analysis, and those sorts of things. It's really difficult to do that when you're looking at 83 sites or even 5, because those require more detailed analysis. And also, I guess I'd like to clarify a couple things on the wetlands. At Site 27, it's Class C and Class B wetlands, and then at Site 18, it's Class A wetlands. And with that, I'll let you speak.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, my name is Tim Potter with Dow. And I just wanted to reflect on a couple of items that did come up as far as some of the testimony. One woman spoke about in Stuckagon Heights the extent that she went to in the design process. and that we should be doing that on a lot more than just one or two of the sites. And, you know, I just simply ask her if she had to do that to 5 different sites and architectural designs before figuring out what she was going to do, she probably would have spent all the money that she had saved to try and build a house and have her dream house in that location. So equally, this is a process, as Laquita indicated, that you hone in and go through a kind of a sieve analysis of figuring out, are there Achilles heels to different sites? And there are, and some of them fall out very quickly. And you get down to where you really do a little bit more detailed look at 5. And then you figure out that there's really 2 that might be in the offering that are worthy of going forward and having more work done. The staff has come back and indicated that, quite frankly, as a result of their review and analysis of the information, that really there's only one site that's worthy of having the time and money spent on it right now, and to go forward with that, Site 27. And we're not objecting to that outcome and that recommendation at all. It is required to go through a conditional use that goes into a lot of detail, including architectural design, the site plan, and there's a compatibility test. In order for you to be able to grant approval of a conditional use, it either has to be found to be compatible or found that it can be made compatible. We understand that from a traffic standpoint, wetlands, habitat, everything including air pollution and air quality. So, Ms. Bailey, that is where the appropriate place is to do that, and it would be incorporated into the conditional use process to do that, just like a traffic impact analysis would be. So with that, to go to the economics of why the hell are we doing this? The why is that we have a building that probably should have been condemned by the health department, that the health department occupies downtown at the corner of L and 9th Avenue. If they probably did their own inspection, they probably would have red tagged their own building and facility years ago. The city has been trying for decades, and John worked there for some period, to find a new building and location. They've tried multiple times. They put out a proposal or an RFP for developers to come up with a plan on building a new facility and taking the existing corner lot at L and 9th and the existing old Teamsters Hospital as trade. There's not enough money to make the project work. So the city has put up property from a lease standpoint and then a future sale for a new site, for a new building in the probably $15 to $20 million range for a new facility there at the Tudor and Elmore site next to Tozer Track. So that's a way for a city that is low on cash to be able to afford a new facility that's probably needed to have been replaced for the last 30 years. Likewise, if anybody in the audience or the commission were to go tour the transportation facility that ASD now occupies, it's not great shakes. It's going to need to be replaced, maybe not this year, but next year, the next year probably, to the tune of more tax dollars as we provide appropriate infrastructure for the school district. The transit or the transportation facility will be built at no cost to the Anchorage School District or the taxpayers as part of this deal, and that's why the remainder of the property going from Tozer Track all the way over to Elmore is being put up as basically trade collateral to support the new facilities that are being built. And in doing that, then meeting some of the context, direction, and strategy of the 2040 plan to make that a town center. I've been doing this a long time, and Barbara Garner and I think most of the times are pretty friendly. One of the things, well, there's 2 things that they've said for the 38 years I've been doing this, and Barbara is one of them, that they needed a grocery store over in that part of town because there was a food desert, and the darn school buses put out a lot of diesel fumes, and it was a problem. Right? One of the things that will be looked at as part of this is what do you do about dealing with the diesel particulate and the fumes. Already, the Anchorage School District, as they put on new buses, as they transition through their buses, is replacing those with equipment that now has a better exhaust and treatment system, so it takes out the particulate and reduces the fumes. Likewise, there's opportunities for preheating the buses. They're already plugged in, so the engine blocks are not starting cold. They are plugged in, so that helps. But there could be a way to boost the heating interior because, as was indicated, by the time the first student is picked up on a route, the interior of the bus is supposed to be at 45 degrees. So it's really trying to augment the heating system so you're not running the diesel to get the interior space heated up in the bus. So if there was a preheating that could be done at an equal cost of running diesel versus charging it with electric or something else or natural gas, there are ways to do that. So we're working on all that, and those would be part of the things that would be a component of proving up to the commission that we can be made compatible with the surrounding neighborhood. So if there's any other questions, we'd be happy to answer them.
Other questions for the petitioner or the staff? Mr. Potter, what are the assumptions when in this development deal, the assumption is that that's the replacement of the facility is part of that deal. But what were the assumptions that went into the type of facility that was to be, to sort of to replace the existing facility?
The Anchorage School District put together a program with their architects and consulting architects and what they needed. So there is an office building component which is attached to a multi-bay shop. There is a cleaning bay or bus wash. There is a refueling component which would be better adapted than what they have out there today, so to be more like a filling station. There is some parking area for other snow removal equipment and other equipment out there, and then snow storage. And it would be a more efficient operation than they currently have today.
And the only sort of idea related to the diesel itself is somehow managing the equipment itself thus far.
They're attempting to trade out the buses at a faster rate than they have been. I think they did 12 to 16 this last year. So they are probably in need of another 80 that they have to get changed over and transitioned. So this is a transitional period in time to get that. Preheating has been discussed, and we're looking and evaluating. So when we get to the conditional use process, if this is the site that's going forward, that will be evaluated if there's other methods to do that. There was an attempt to incorporate shop facility, build a new office building, and build a bigger bus barn and share that with the public transit people mover. The problem is that anytime you use federal money, and they use FTA money, federal transportation, that if you let anyone else utilize the facility, you have to charge them a going commercial rate, which would have been more than what the school district could have accommodated. So that was another financial issue.
If Site 27 ends up being recommended either by us or by the Assembly, and then you get to the conditional use process and you're not able to satisfy the concerns related to air quality concerns, where do you go there? Does the school district have to look at the area in which they've decided they need to, clearly they've located an area which was the basis for your site selection. That's primarily because of logistics, I would assume, right?
Yes.
Would they then be compelled to look outside of that logistical area? I mean, there are other places that are higher industrial places,
it's a really good question,
right?
and you kind of asked me my opinion. And my initial thought is that at that point, the developer will likely choose to do something else or go somewhere else, and the city will have to find someone to backfill that position or not. And what we have today, it will be the no-build option, so there won't be anything to betterment the existing structures. And the only upgrade as far as fumes and particulates will be the trade out of the buses over the next 10 years or so.
Yeah, I mean, whatever. I mean, that if that's the deal, that's the deal. You're not going to sacrifice a neighborhood if there truly is an impact because of that deal. Was there any contemplation over making smaller facilities rather than one singular site? We have, I think, one of the largest school districts by landmass anywhere in the country, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, they already contract out 60% of the bus fleet from an operations standpoint. So they're already kind of doing that. They have held on to about 40%, which is basically the northeast, going slightly maybe west of A and C Street to West High School. They've retained that for a variety of reasons, but they have a lot of specialty need buses that they choose to operate in those trips versus having that contracted out.
Great.
So, and it allows them in their arguments to keep there's always the potential of just taking it all back, so when they put out a new RFP, that they really understand what the costs are, so that they get a better deal and they're a better negotiating position when they put those contracts out on the street. As far as splitting up that 40% into multiple locations, you are as aware as I am how many limitations there are on sites out there, and I know Andre is too, out there, what's available. That would be in the I-1, I-2, or PLI zoning, or be able to be changed to do that. So I think you're creating more issues, number one, from being able to actually pull that off, have the potential of impacting even a greater number of people, and proximity issues. And, you know, I just don't see them having, from an efficiency standpoint, a beneficial impact on costs of operation for the taxpayers in the school district by having 5 locations to put in fueling stations, all those kinds of things, to be able to do that. In all the meetings that we've sat in over the last year and a half or so doing this study, consolidation to a single location is pretty critical from a personnel and operation standpoint to be efficient and effective.
Great. Thank you. I see, one last question maybe. Mr. Looney, go ahead.
Oh, I just thought I'd throw things in. I see and definitely insensitive to the air quality, and maybe there was alluded to with the earlier questions, but would a indoor bus barn make, or you don't really have to decide yet, but would that be on the table for the Site 27?
Not from a developer-paid deal. The city doesn't have the money. If the state were to put that up, that'd be awesome. I think they'd do it in a second.
Okay.
And
Last chance for
that was on the record,
Commissioner.
so I hope the representatives here heard that, and it is a need of the community if we're going to do that. And as far as the signal goes at Patterson, I would not bet even 0.5% that you would ever get that permitted.
Right. So it's not like you have done that formal analysis, but you're both both what we heard in testimony and your assessment is that would be highly unlikely.
Highly unlikely.
Yeah.
Of course, another way to address the air quality would be, of course, to start the buses at cold, get them cold, but they'd have to drive around before they actually picked up kids. That would work essentially, right? Okay.
Right. We're not going to go. Let's not go there.
Okay.
So Brian's volunteering for the 4 to 5 shift. I'll take 5 to 6.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. But that does happen. So when the operators, and it's really nice to have one of the bus drivers here, because they, based on the ambient temperature in the morning is when they actually go and they get their buses started and the work gets started and done. And they pretty much have an idea based on what the ambient outside air temperature is and what the temperature needs to be in the bus when they leave so that it's 45 by the time they pick up their first kid. So they may drive.
15 years we got till electric buses, folks. We got to make it 15 years, and then we're good to go.
Anyway, a cruel person would have suggested that to warm up the bus, they drive up to the top of Camp Learstrip Road and come back down. But I'm not going to say that.
And deliver water to a water tank for fire protection. It'd be awesome.
All right, we're clearly losing it. At this point, I would like to close the public hearing. Thank you. What's the wish of the body? I'm going at this for a couple hours. Mr. Anderson.
In the case of 2018-0133 public facility site selection, I move to approve the recommendation of the staff to select and move forward with Site 27.
And that is a second, Mr. Looney? You're good with that? Yep, seconded by Mr. Looney. Okay, Mr. Anderson.
I think that there was a lot of investigation done into sites in the study area and a good analysis done to whittle down from the 80-plus original sites to 5 to look at more closely. The 2 that we discussed tonight, Site 18 and 27, Site 18 has, in my opinion, and in the testimony that we heard, more restrictive qualities than Site 27, including Site 27 has better infrastructure such as roads, existing signaling, and utilities, and Site 18 is also more sensitive to new environmental impacts due to the topography and being in uncontinuous, undeveloped area.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Mr. Looney.
And to follow up with Commissioner Anderson, I find that, of course, both parcels have pros and cons, but parcel 27 meets the 9 criteria that we're using for consideration here. Specifically, parcel 18 falls a little short on criteria 1, 3, 4, and 6, where it's generally just partially met, whereas Site 27 meets all those criteria much more clearly.
Thank you, Mr. Looney. Ms. Bailey.
I just first want to make clear that I'm going to be voting to support the motion. However, I'm not doing so because Site 27 is better than Site 18. I'm going to do so because I believe Site 27 meets the criteria. And going through them one by one, I believe that Site 27 is compatible with the surrounding uses. Specifically, while there may be some residential areas that may be built directly to the west, on all other areas there is not residential. And on all 4 sides it's surrounded by major roadways. I believe that the staff packet made clear that the site is large enough to accommodate the space. Also, when I addressed the 4 surrounding roadways, I think that also goes to the utility and transportation infrastructure, whether it's able to support the site, as well as whether it is compatible with the intensity of the surrounding district. One area that I want to note that I do not believe it is currently compatible with is number 7, which is environmental sustainability. However, I am going to recommend approval of the site because I believe it can be made compatible. I think that one thing that the Assembly is going to have to take note of is the fact that this is an area that may need an enclosure or may need additional things to eliminate some of the exhaust that is happening in the area. I don't think the air pollution was adequately looked at, but I believe it is something that can be made compatible if enough planning is done later on or in the conditional use permitting stage. However, I don't think it needs to be fully compatible yet. It only needs to be able to be made compatible in the future. I also want to get on the record some of the reasons that I feel like Site 18 is not appropriate. Specifically, I think it goes towards the safety aspects, and that there is only one access road to the neighborhood up Campbell Airstrip Road, and there's really a huge safety concern for me, for the lives of the people in that area, that if emergency service responders are delayed because of buses coming in and out, that would directly impact a whole neighborhood and community, and there's no other alternative access road, whereas, again, like I said earlier, Site 27 has many access roads that can be reached, and so if there are any emergencies, emergency services could bypass that area if there are traffic jams. Furthermore, I want to point out that we had public comments from many of the community councils in the neighborhood, and I want to specifically thank those who came from the Basher, I believe it's the Basher Community Council neighborhood, because it was not directly in that 500 feet area, and so I also want to thank staff for making sure that down the road that they were notified, because it was important to get their contribution in this area. I also want to acknowledge the comments from the members, specifically from the UACC. It's never easy when things are right next to your community, and I really appreciate the fact that their comments were primarily addressed to the environmental areas, because I too found that to be one of the areas that I think needs improvement, and so I think their comments were very helpful in that regard.
Thank you, Ms. Bailey. Mr. Looney, are you back in, or is that from before? I think I'd just say I think I'm going to support the motion. I will say when I read the term community facility or institution, which is what we're calling the bus barn, that's not what comes to my mind. What comes to my mind is, in fact, the other uses in the UMed area. It is, in fact, the hospitals, the universities, the campuses that are created there, the both combination of public and private uses. And while it is a facility that's owned by the community, by our school district, the use to me is an industrial use. And I struggle with placing an industrial use in the middle of our UMed area. In fact, so much so that we're moving this because we're trying to expand the UMed area at Tudor and Elmore. And so to just go over the road and no more, to me, is only can be explained as the result of the best of many bad options. That's what this feels like to me. Because I think if there had been a more identifiable industrial area within the red lines that the school district drew, that we would have gravitated towards that location. I find it amazing that the municipality is going to such lengths to clear this area, to expand that UMed, invest in housing, invest in grocery stores, invest in the own health department building, and is locating this industrial use just across the road. So Again, I commend Dowell for doing the evaluation that you did. I think you did a very thorough evaluation. I think given the lots that were within the scope of your work, you came to the logical conclusion that I think makes the most sense. But that said, I'm not convinced this is the right location for this use, and I won't be convinced until I see a conditional use application that satisfies not only all of those conditions visually, but from a health and from a noise standpoint as well. Mr. Gardner.
I think I was prompted by your comments because I think I had been going through the same kind of considerations and struggled with it for the same reason. I think I come out the same way as you do. And just another thought that came to my mind about this process, which I think is just inherent in the nature of the beast, is that when we're talking about school buses, they need to have some sort of proximity to the communities where they're actually going to be taking the students, and I think it's just really hard to have that in a way where the buses can then be entirely separated from those communities at the end of the day, and that's just something that we have to figure out how to best resolve. And I think with the limitations that we have available, this is kind of the best of a bad set of options. But I also will be looking and really interested to see a lot of care and consideration that goes into what remedial effects can be taken to help address that those contamination concerns when we do get to the conditional use process later down the road.
Thank you, Mr. Gardner. Please vote. That recommendation is forwarded to the Assembly. Staff, do you have a sense of, or Laquita, or Mr. Potter, any sense of when that might come to the Assembly?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Tomorrow morning I'll write the resolution, which is the written form of the decision that you made tonight, and then in 2 weeks you'll have that on your agenda for adoption, and then I'll send it to the Assembly as soon as the morning after your next meeting, and it'll be introduced on an Assembly agenda, and then it'll be another public hearing, so you got to wait 21 days. So anyway, 2 months from now.
Okay.
It's entirely up to the Assembly.
Very good. Thank you, everybody, for tonight. I know it was a long evening. Appreciate you all being here. I'll take a motion to adjourn. Moved by Ms. Bailey, seconded by Mr. Anderson. This meeting is adjourned.